Okay, so to start off this afternoon, we're going to look at a model of affordable homeownership. Many of you, I'm sure, have all heard about it. And it's a great success story, not only in Nova Scotia, but across the country and really throughout the world. Habitat for Humanity has helped thousands of deserving Canadian families realize their dream of homeownership. So we'll hear all about the benefits of homeownership through the lens and the research that Habitat has done over the years. And we'll hear all about how Habitat provides a hand up and not a handout. So I hope I'm not stealing too much of your thunder. So before we have our speaker here, we're going to look at a quick video that was again brought to you by Habitat for Humanity.
My name is Leonardo Miranda Jr. My name is Gabby.
I'm having Mosh.
My name is Darius.
My name is Elizabeth.
My name is Jade.
My name is Mariah.
My name is Hannah, and this is my house.
Before we moved here, we lived in a trailer. That was not a fun thing.
I like that house because I get a chance to grow my own flowers and play in the yard with my baby brother and sister.
I really like my porch because we can sit in the rain without it actually getting on us.
I like my house because I have my own room.
My mother helped me in our house. I painted some doors and a little bit of the wall.
I painted one of the rooms. Like, I helped paint one of the rooms. Kind of made a mistake, but it was okay.
My walls are going to be purple. That's my favorite color.
Well, my family actually worked on it, not just like everyone I don't know.
My mom, my grandpa,
Me and my sister.
my Uncle Larry, my Uncle Doug,
Me and my brother.
my church sister, my big brother, and my big sister all worked on my house.
It's something we did ourselves. It's ours.
I think this is the best house I ever had.
Every kid should have a good home.
Everyone should have a home. Everyone should have a home. This is my dream. When I get older,
I want to build houses for people who don't have good homes.
we can do it. 1,000 more houses.
20,000 more houses.
I think we can build another 200,000 houses.
We can build a million houses.
I'll help build it. I'll help build it.
I'll help build it.
I'll help build it. I'll help build it.
I'll help build it.
I'd like to help build it.
Help build it. I love my house.
Great video. So our speaker for Habitat for Humanity is David Bowden. David is a board director and past chair of Habitat for Humanity Canada. For the past 4 years, David has provided strategic executive management and business transformation services for a variety of major corporate clients. Previous senior roles have included president of CIM, Canada's largest outsourced marketing and sales service provider, senior vice president at Direct Energy, responsible for business and residential markets across Canada. Also president of residential services for Sprint Canada and founding president of Empori.com. He has held international and executive positions at Labatt Interbrew, Canada Post, Beta Shoes, Warner Lumber. His career began in engineering at General Motors in prototype vehicle development and manufacturing. David was chairman of the board for Habitat for Humanity Toronto before joining the National Board of Directors for Habitat for Humanity in 2010, and is also a director of Beta Shoe Museum. A few months ago, David resigned in his position as chair of the board for Habitat for Humanity Canada to serve as the interim president and CEO, while Habitat searched for a permanent candidate to fill that role, which I understand was recently filled. So David studied international engineering at the University of Toronto and has an international MBA from the Rotman School of Management. He and his wife have 2 children and enjoy traveling in many parts of the world, and you can now add Halifax to that list if it wasn't already on there. So thank you very much, David, for being here, and we look forward to your presentation.
Good afternoon. As you may have gathered from that introduction, I move around in different jobs and work on different things, wherever there's an interesting business problem to work on. But for the last 14 years, I've been working with Habitat for Humanity because I get that problem and I like what they do, and I think we're making a lot of progress with it. It's funny how I got involved. I was at a cocktail party 14 years ago, a boring cocktail party, and I said to another gentleman there who looked as bored as I was, what do you do in your spare time? And he said, well, I volunteer with Habitat for Humanity. I'm on the family selection committee to pick the families. And I'm thinking, thank God I didn't say it out loud, you build houses, you give them to poor people. How hard can it be to find the families that want them? And as I started to learn about the model, I found out how wrong that myth was about Habitat. We'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. But the more I found out about it, the more intriguing and engaging it became as an organization that supports affordable home ownership and funds himself in a very self-sufficient and aggressive way. So anyway, started with and I realized too, earlier this morning I got mentioned, I guess I'm an expert because I came just over 1,000 miles, and I did have a briefcase with a couple of notes that I probably won't follow because I always go off script by the second slide. But I was in the Valley yesterday because my daughter and son-in-law have lived there for the last 4 years. In fact, my son-in-law grew up in the Valley, so I'm not a total stranger to Nova Scotia. And now we have a granddaughter in the Valley, so we're down here even more often. So I'm a pretty regular visitor to Nova Scotia. We've been housing's complicated. There's a whole bunch of barriers that are coming for getting people into housing, and the group I'm going to talk to you about is a group that probably has, under normal situation, they're below the level where they'd ever qualify to get into their own home. And what Habitat's trying to do is to select out of that group people that can get into home ownership and not just bump them up to the very bottom line where they're sitting on the marginal edge in the first winter where they have a problem for a couple months, they get knocked out because that's too risky a position to put them in, but get them comfortably over the edge so that they can get into a home, stay in that home, and succeed in owning the home. And that's really what we're focused on doing. Poverty and housing are closely correlated. Poverty is a complicated issue. There's a lot of reasons why people are there, and so is housing, and there's a lot of reasons why people can't afford a house. But when you're living without owning your own home, on marginal income, it creates such an insecurity for families, and the issues that the families are going through are related to not having any stability in their life. You can't get well educated because you're always moving. Your kids are moving around. They don't stay in the same school. They don't keep the same friends. And this whole cycle begins of spiraling down. And there are a bunch of families that are on that treadmill and just need a little bit of a nugget of a down payment and a bit of stability to get off it, and then they take off all on their own. But they can't get off the treadmill on their own without a boost. Their parents make choices on paying the rent or buying food or whatever they're having to choose between. And if they chose to buy food this month, they may get kicked out and find themselves looking for another place to live next month, which is a tough place to be. I'll give you an example of one of the types of families that Habitat runs into. There was a lady that left an abusive marriage relationship with her two kids in Eastern Canada, got in her car, drove as far as she could get, ended up in Grey Bruce County, which is at the base of the Bruce Peninsula in central Ontario. Her car ran out of gas in front of a farm. There was an old farmhouse that was boarded up next to a newer farmhouse, so she went and knocked on the door and she asked the farmer if they could sleep in the boarded up house. And he said, yeah. Anyway, they ended up staying there longer. This was the end of the summer. Kids started going to school. There was no power or anything in the house, so she actually got a car headlight and rigged it up in the kitchen. And she would take the battery from her car in every night so the kids had light to do their homework for school. We found her, got her into a house, got her into the partnership program, and they're doing great now. But all she needed was just a break to get that. Anyway, Habitat runs across all 3 coasts. So we're in all 10 provinces, 3 territories. Yes, I have built houses in Nunavut. The construction's a bit different up there, but we do work up there. I'm going to talk today about 1 goal for Habitat, 2 myths about Habitat, and 3 commitments that we make as an organization when we partner with families and regions to build homes. We're all over the world. Our goal is to provide simple, decent, affordable housing for people. We're in 90 countries, Every 4 minutes around the world, another family takes the keys to their new home, and they buy the homes. The first big myth about Habitat is that it was started by Jimmy Carter. It was not. Everybody thinks it was started by Jimmy Carter. It wasn't started by Jimmy Carter. It was started by Millard Fuller, who was a lawyer, a very successful one in Georgia, and he thought everybody needed a safe place to live. So he wanted to mobilize volunteers and build partners. However, he went to the same church as Jimmy Carter. And very soon Jimmy Carter got involved and became probably our most famous spokesperson for Habitat. But it wasn't Jimmy who started it. And then whenever I meet anybody, they say, oh yeah, I know Habitat. It was started by Jimmy. The second thing is the same myth that I believed about Habitat, which is that we give houses away to people. Every family in a Habitat home buys the house, and they buy the house at fair market value. They also buy it on a mortgage that doesn't have interest. And you know, when you buy your first house, most of your money is going into interest. And that's how it becomes affordable for families earning $35,000 or $40,000 to buy a house. But it's a little more complicated than that. So the commitments, the first commitment we make when we talk to donors, when we talk to government, or when we talk to partner families that work with us, is that we will be good stewards of the money. We will leverage the donations that are made 2 to 3-fold to be able to put a house together. We build for about $80 a square foot, which is a good price. We build at that price in Toronto, we build at that price in Alberta, and we build at that price. Now, there are variations, but in general, we aim to be under $100 on our building. And what we do is when we get the money to build a house and we leverage it up, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, we sell the house to the family and they start paying it off. And as they pay it off, it is written into our charter, we must do this. We take those mortgage payments and we reinvest it in another house. So in 20 years, when the house is paid off, it actually has generated enough money to build another house during the course of that. As well, in fact, though, if you have 20 houses all at once right now, they're generating enough this year to buy one additional house this year and one additional house next year, and on it goes. We actually have thousands of houses across Canada that are building over 100 houses each year just in the payments that are flowing back in. And it's in perpetuity. It's like a forever and ever annuity in the way that that works, that we reinvest. So how do we do this? There's that virtuous circle of build, buy, and reinvest. How do we make the houses affordable? So we'll collect money, sometimes $10 and $20 at a time till we have $80,000 or $90,000 to build. Sometimes we'll get a corporation to sponsor us for $80,000 to build a house. But then we'll get volunteer labor, and Habitat's very famous for that volunteer model of neighbors and employees and people coming out to build. We get donated materials. Not all our materials, because you can't always find for free what you need, but we get a lot of it donated. We try and get surplus land, sometimes from corporations. Sometimes someone will die and give us land. A lot of the time the government has surplus land. And actually their surplus land is really messy because it's probably disused, it's not earning any tax base, it's not particularly good or useful land, and we can develop that. So municipalities and provinces are really helpful for that. Simple, decent housing is what we build. The designs are simple. We're typically between 850, 900 square feet and 1,200 square feet for the houses that we build. And so our cash in could be $100,000 plus getting the land, the volunteers. 0% interest. We say there's no down payment, and we heard earlier about the barrier that the down payment creates. On the other hand, the families don't just walk in the door. Every partner family is required to do 3 months of sweat equity. That's 3 months full-time, 500 hours of work for free. Building their house, building someone else's house, working in one of our stores or something like that. But put a value on 3 months of full productive time. And for a lot of these families that are working a couple of part-time jobs, that's actually sacrificed income for them to come in and do it. That's a huge factor in terms of testing the family. How serious are they about wanting to get into home ownership? So they pay with their sweat. There's no doubt about it. The monthly payments for the family to keep this affordable are geared to their income. Typically, they're 30% of a family's income. And as their income goes up over time, that payment will go up. But if if we built the house for $100,000, it's probably got a $200,000 fair market value anyway. But if you take 30% of a $35,000 or $40,000 family income, that's enough money over 20 years to pay off that house and discharge the mortgage. And that's how you do it, if you don't have to pay income or interest all the way along the way. We also are reinvesting the money, as I mentioned. Our administration costs and everything are quite low as well, and obviously there's no profit on top of that. So that's how we can build a house fairly affordably. For $100,000 in, we can get a $200,000 fair market value house that a family on a $30,000 income can afford. So who wouldn't want to do that? But then we look at the families. We use and we're required by CRA to actually use the low-income cutoff, or LICO numbers. And if a family's income is below that, and it varies by part of the country, but it's maybe $40,000 to $50,000, depending on family size and where they are, and then we'll go down to how low could their income be, and they could still amortize and pay off a house, which depends. It's between $25,000 is the bottom end, and $40,000 to $50,000 is the upper end. So those are the people that we're helping, and arguably most people in that income band are probably not ever going to entertain the possibility of owning their own home. But they need to have a job. If you're in a desperate social situation and you don't have a job, Habitat can't help you. You have a different set of problems till you can get an income and do that. And there are other programs for it, but we're fairly focused on our model. We've discussed about, do we expand it? But what we're doing works, and there's a lot of scale that we can add to that already. They have to be able to pay with stable income. Sometimes people on permanent disability as well, because that's very secure income as well. And we build a lot of accessible homes, because there are people living with special needs children or paraplegics, and they're in second and third floor walk-ups and things like that. They just can't get out. So we will do that. They partner with us. We screen all the families for need, and there's a criteria of 6 different things around security, health, safety. Overcrowding's a big one. In a Habitat home, we'll never put more than 2 kids in the same room, and they have to be the same sex. So a family with 4 kids, if there were 2 boys and 2 girls, would get a 3-bedroom house or something like that. If there were 3 girls and 1 boy, they'd get a 4-bedroom house. So we have some sort of minimum criteria that we think meets basic housing conditions for people. And our success rate in terms of families that go in and stay in the program and make all their payments and see it through is over 99%. Stuff still happens, life happens. Sometimes life turns out like a country and western song, and things change. But generally, the success rate is really high if you select good partners to go with you. We talk about it being a hand up, not a hand out, because we're not giving it away, and the families are really, really engaged in their own solution of working on this house. And that engagement is really key. They've got a stake in it. So most of the families are sitting where you see that family in the middle. So they've got an income, but they're struggling, and they're living in bad conditions. And one of 2 things can happen over the next 10 or 15 years for that family. Without any intervention, typically what happens is they start to slide down that scale, and they start to begin to use more social services. They start to have health issues. A lot of the bad housing, bad rental housing, tends to have structural issues. It's poorly heated, it's damp, it's moldy, it's rodent infested, it's insect infested, and the list goes on. But we see it all, and we read in reports. And it's terrible when you have one house ready and you have 3 families in terrible conditions of need. It's really a Sophie's choice on who do you help. But there's greater use of social service. They're living in subsidized housing. Their health care costs go up, and they just sit in this downward spiral. They're not there, though, at the point when we can find them in a lot of cases. They're typically able to say, if they can get one piece of their life under control and start building the other pieces, the homeowners, the adults, will go in and upgrade their skills. They'll be more regular, their employment improves, and I'll show you some statistics on that in a few minutes. Their healthcare costs and use of the healthcare system goes down. But the really big impact happens for the kids. in terms of their ability, and we've got good statistics on how much better it is for their education. My wife goes with me to home dedications, and she's always talking about, I met this little girl who said, you know, now that she's got her Habitat home, she can sit at her desk in her room and study, because where at her old house, she used to be at the kitchen table, but every time there were drug dealers or gangs in the hall, she'd have to leave the kitchen and go into her closet and stay there to be safe. Another little boy that used to have to lie on the bathroom floor because it was the only place that had enough light for him to be able to do his homework. And now and it's stuff we all take for granted, and we all know that there's people living without it, but we see it. And if we can offer just those basics, they can start to move up. The potential for the kids is really great from an education point of view, but for the adults as well, just for their dignity and self-respect, there's real benefit to being part of your own solution, paying for things yourself and working for it. So Boston Consulting Group, which is, those are the real experts who all come with briefcases and usually really expensive meters running, agreed to do some volunteer work for us to help quantify the benefits. Because we can talk anecdotally about it to donors. CMHC did a good study a couple of years ago, but to some degree this is an extension of that study and an effort to try and get more specific, which they did pro bono for us. And at a high level, there are sort of three conclusions. So this is if you only have a 1-minute meeting and you have to tell people about it. Providing the stable housing environment, which we do, generates huge benefits on other dimensions in employment, income, education, social civic engagement, and health. Our model allows really low cost to build homes. And I've already described that. And our program generates, just in their first pass of what they were able to quantify, $120,000 of net positive social benefits. Not what the family gets, but back to society for doing that. So you weigh up how much do we want to spend to be able to access those benefits. They studied 200 plus Habitat families, and you need a period of time. So 10, 15 years ago, Habitat wasn't as big as it was, so we've tracked a couple hundred families and about 300 families in a control group, and you're kind of doing before and after comparisons on that. This is what the consultants call the money slide. So this is really the benefits that came up. So access to home ownership, the control group of people in this category, less than 20% of them ever find their way into owning their own home. With the Habitat model, 100% of the ones that qualify for the model get to be homeowners, and 99% of them succeed at it. In terms of employment, it's really typical for us to see these people, partially because their life is so transient, working a couple of different jobs, a full-time and a part-time, 2 part-time, sometimes 3 jobs that they're working. If it's a 2-parent family, then both of them are probably working multiple jobs. Once they've been in the Habitat homes, their number of hours worked doesn't change, but the number of jobs they hold does change. It goes down. There's a 35% reduction for the primary income earner and a 50% reduction for the secondary one on multiple jobs being held. And it's because they're getting better jobs, because we also see a corresponding increase in income once they get home and stability. Second thing is reduced usage of all sorts of social services. One that was easy to quantify was food bank. There's an 80% reduction in their need to go to food bank, and instead of going on a weekly or monthly basis, they're going 2 or 3 times a year for 20% of the Habitat families. The other 80% don't need to go at all, but they've really addressed that. And you know there's a whole host of other related social services as well. Improved health behaviors. Interestingly, and this was a surprising statistic for us, there was a 30% drop in rates of smoking among Habitat homeowners from before and after. And it was just, I don't know whether it's related to you don't want to smoke in your own house that you own now instead of a crummy subsidized apartment that you're living in, or you're more concerned about the kids, or you're more hopeful for the future, or you've got less stress. But anyway, there's a health benefit on that. There's a health benefit on physical activity. That was actually another surprising one. Over 50% of the Habitat families, the principal owners, mom and dad, or one of those two if it's a single parent family, are physically active. And interesting, that's over 50%. The Canadian population average is 15%. So they're really active that way. They get engaged in the community. We had 2 families into a meeting last week when we got a sneak peek at this research. The full report is not coming out until February from Boston Consulting Group, so I begged a few slides from them, and we shared them last Thursday with a donor group there. We had a couple of families there, and one of the women said, you know, it's interesting. I moved into my Habitat home last year, and for the first time since I came to Canada, I voted in an election. And she'd been here 10 or 11 years. They get socially engaged that way in the community. They volunteer. The volunteerism rates are over 60% for Habitat families versus about 25% for the control group. They donate money to charities. About 30% of the control group donate about $300 a year. And I don't have all these charts because they wouldn't give them to me in advance. They'll all be in the final report when it comes out. With the Habitat group, over 60% are donating, and they're donating twice as much. So there's 4 times the degree of participation. But they're just representative of all the different things going on. And then there's the education for the kids. The number of kids that drop out, which is about 30% in the control group and don't even finish high school, is cut by more than half in the case of Habitat for Humanity. The number that go to university is more than tripled in terms of the control group versus the Habitat for Humanity homes. And there's some categories in between of finished high school and some post-secondary, finished college, finished university. And it's not that the ones that dropped out of school actually went to university. It's that at each level along the way, people are moving up one level in terms of their education because they're finishing high school, and the group that each group moves up and along. It's easier on the picture chart when we get the final report, but there's a massive impact for the kids in terms of education. So, social return on investment. This is their slide. I wouldn't have done it this way, but I don't charge their fees either. But they didn't charge us, so that's okay. So the first 1 to 2 years, you make an investment in the family, and you can see that on the left-hand side where those short arrows are over the blue box. And then underneath the green box, you have a 20 to 25-year return period in terms of that paying back benefits to the family and social benefits. The types of benefits that come out, and let's just talk about the left side for a minute for the individual. We've talked about better employment that they get, better educational prospects, and they do upgrade their skills. Participating in society in the ways I described, health, and the others. They also own a home, and they build up equity. So they get the security that $100,000 worth of equity and maybe finally $300,000 worth of equity brings. And on society, we've seen that. So if we look at that in dollars, the cost to build a home, and they don't look at just the dollars, they look at the value of the land that's donated and everything else that we have to put in. So we work to get that so we don't need hard cash, but all in, it's about $230,000 to build that house, or that's the fair market value of the house. But it gets paid back through the mortgage, and the net present value of that is almost equal to the amount of money that had to go in or donated materials. We have a little bit of overhead for our national office. Our local affiliates also have overhead of about $60,000 that you can see there. So there is some overhead. But none of the donors like their money to go to overhead. They know every organization has overhead, but they don't use someone else's money for that. I don't want my donation going to overhead. I want it going to build houses. So we run a chain of stores across the country. There's a slide on them later. But for every affiliate across the country on average, they cover all of the overhead costs. All of the administration and all the fundraising costs are covered by our stores. So that when someone gives us $1, 100 cents goes into building a house. And so net, it costs $45,000 to deliver the $230,000 house when we're done, after we've done our magic. So effectively, we've made that $45,000 investment to get the house. The family starts accruing the benefits. Society gets a $120,000 benefit out of this, and they're going to pay back $230,000 that we use to invest in other houses. It works really well. They talked about $120,000 in social benefits. It's really hard to quantify a lot of the things I described. They went and they just said, what is the tax benefit of those families accelerating their incomes, staying employed, and earning greater incomes? And there's about 60,000, pardon me, I can't read that from here. Yeah, $69,000 worth of benefit. And then there's the benefit for the second generation, for the kids, where they're getting educated and earning higher incomes. That's that's a triple return. That's much better than most of my portfolio that I've got money invested in today, and it's a good way to get money back. But then they said, there's a whole bunch of other quantifiable benefits we haven't even put in. A lot of the people that are in this area work in the shadow economy, so they're not paying any taxes. That was just on their lift-in income. If you move people out of the shadow economy because they have a real house and a real mortgage and stuff, there's all those additional benefits that come back. The healthcare improvements in terms of using the system less. They now don't need supplemental support at retirement because they've got equity in their house. The municipal taxes that that property's earning that it wasn't before. And on it goes. And then there's additional, and they're not using the food bank and the other social services. And then there's a whole bunch of soft benefits as well. I won't bother repeating that. We've got some nice numbers now, though, that we can go to donors and say we can show you very quantitative. And lots of our donors are businesses, so they really want to know. Lots of our partners are government, and they're looking at other choices, so they also want to know, how does it really work? That's how we try and use the money effectively. The second thing that we do is we make a commitment with each family to work very, very closely together with them. Housing's a huge problem. It's scary. You talk to people about it, they say, that's terrible. I describe a sad situation that a family lives in. The government should do something about that. Well, there's 1.4 million Canadians that are living in unsafe poverty housing. That's a scary sized problem even for the government to do. And it's actually really daunting to take on. But what do you do about that? So in the case of Habitat, we actually say, we're going to go solve it. We know our model works. One family, one house at a time. It's not actually nearly so scary to say we're going to mobilize a neighborhood. We're going to get people in the community out to build. Local businesses are going to give us some money. We'll get some land from the municipality. We've got a couple of volunteers that know how to do construction and help us build. And we put a house together. And that house goes up. The family goes into it. 99 times out of 100, their problem is solved, and we repeat it over again. So although it's a giant-sized problem, it's a very modular-sized solution that we do. In larger cities and places, we're doing townhouses now. We do condominium developments because it's more efficient, but it's the same sort of idea. It's a very bite-sized sort of model. Build, sell, repeat. We use lots of volunteers. We use, 11,000 in Toronto, over 60,000 in Canada, and 1 million around the world. And touch wood, construction's a dangerous business. We have a very good safety record with our volunteers working. And they don't just build, they also work in the store, they work in the office, they work helping raise funds. There's lots of ways to help out. And there's a picture of our most famous volunteer, Jimmy Carter, so he did have to get into the presentation somewhere. The third thing for sure, and we've already described how, is this really changes people's lives. These families a dream comes true for them in a big way. This is a letter from a young man that I have met several times over the years. I'll let you read it. So that came with one of the applications from partner families, and we get a lot of applications when we screen families. That was from Harvey. He was 11. His mother, Gabriella, or Gabby, as we all knew her. Here's a picture of Gabby and Harvey about 6 years later on the front steps of their Habitat house. But this same year, and Gabby looks fairly casual there, but she came in and spoke to Rotary for us that year because the Rotary Club wanted a project to do in Toronto. And she looked really well put together. She said, you know, 6 years ago, my son and I were in a difficult situation. I was a single mom. My son was 11, had all the sort of problems. Plus, she said, I was 100 pounds heavier than I am today. I was in a dead-end job without any good skills, and I was alone because my husband had left me. So she said, if you look at me today, I've lost 100 pounds. I've gone to night school. I've upgraded my skills. I have a great new job, and I have a fantastic new husband. And I live in a great Habitat house. Now, she said, the house is fantastic. Habitat helped me get it. She said, but Habitat didn't say no to dessert all those times I needed to do when I've been dieting for the last few years to lose weight. They didn't go to night school and take notes and get me through the course. And they sure as hell didn't hang around in the singles bar to help me find a new husband. But she said, having the Habitat house gave me both the confidence and the hope to go and get the rest of my life sorted out. And these stories are repeated over and over again by people that get 5 years in and 10 years in. And that's the kind of success you hope anybody that's getting into a house will go through. But there's a good chunk of that marginal group that if we can just get them up over the lip, they'll do really, really well. Rotary Toronto, after she spoke, wrote us a check for $1 million. And there's a picture of Harvey, who's now 25, and he has bought his own home. Not a Habitat home. He's just gone out and bought his own home, and he's sitting in the... And he went to college after, you know, he finished high school and everything else. And that's his fiancée with him, and they bought a home together. We don't have so many where we've got sort of a 10 to 15-year history like that to show up, but we've, over the last 5 years, as we've really expanded and added about 1,500 additional homes across Canada, there's going to be a lot of stories like this repeating it. Other things, variations on it that we do in Canada, we have an Aboriginal program. Lots of people, everyone's aware of the problems with Aboriginal housing. We have Women's Build. Probably a third of our affiliates across the country will do a Women's Build where women raise the money, women come on site and build, women are supervisors there. The one in Toronto in September, we had just over 1,000 women come out. They raised $1 million between them, and they started 33 homes. Now, the million won't build 33 homes. It'll probably build about 10 or 12 of those homes, but the whole site's been started. And it's an interesting angle in terms of engagement, teaching building skills to women that want to learn it, and women from all different levels that want to come out and volunteer. We do lots of youth builds and skills training. I'll talk more about the Restore in a minute. And we do fairly good sustainable building, because if we can make a home more energy efficient, it reduces the operating costs. One caveat, though, we don't go over the top with highly expensive energy-saving devices, because that puts the fair market value up. And frankly, these families don't need to be on the bleeding edge of green technology. That's not making a home more affordable for them. But all the well-established practices, we build to those. So 2 milestones we had this year. One was our 100th Aboriginal home. The other is, and there's Aboriginal housing in lots of different places, but we've started doing on-reserve building this year as well, which is trickier because of land title, but out in Lloydminster we're doing a 10-unit on-reserve build, and we've done a fair amount of on-reserve for Métis land as well in Alberta. And the skills training part is really, really key for our Aboriginal volunteers. And we have different bands all over the place wanting to come and volunteer on builds so that their own youth can get trained in how you build, how you drywall, how you fix this, because they have so much rundown housing and the skills training programs are just not enough to keep up. Just a short commercial for the Restore. This idea of Restore, which sells recycled and salvage materials and end of lines, Home Depot gives us about $5 million worth of material a year, which is all end of lines and returns and things, and we sell it for between 25 and 50 cents on the dollar. It was invented in Winnipeg. There's over 90 of these stores across Canada now. They're also in the United States. They're also in Europe, but this was a Canadian invention to augment Habitat, and this is how we pay all of our overhead and fundraising costs. And we divert 30,000 tons of landfill every year. So the salvage materials that we're reselling, whether they're kitchens that people are taking and putting in their houses, excess windows, flooring, paneling, all kinds of stuff. It works really, really well, and it's growing double digits a year. It grosses over $40 million and contributes $20 million to Habitat, which is our overhead. Lots of stuff going on overseas. How are we doing for time? Are we? Oh God, how am I going to stretch it out? I won't stretch it out. We do overseas, very same thing. People go in and build houses. We employ more local tradespeople because the labor's not as expensive there to help work on them, but the families still do sweat equity. They still buy their houses. We do a lot of work lobbying the governments to get title to land because the land title that we take for granted here isn't so well established in a lot of the countries. We also have to do a lot of infrastructure. When I was in Nicaragua building homes a couple of years ago, we were building some very nice homes for there, earthquake-proof. We would probably call them a garage, but they were concrete block. They were safe, dry, and hurricane-proof and earthquake-proof. But there's no water. So we will put in a well and service a community of 50 people where there might be 10 Habitat homes and 40 others. Same thing with sewage and sanitation. So often we'll have to build those services out in the developing world, which we do. We're doing microfinance in Africa. We're doing skills training for construction as well with the MasterCard Foundation, and a little bit of disaster response. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on globally. And not everybody wants to build houses at home. They want to go away or somewhere else, but we're finding actually, no matter which door they come in, if we engage them, and people tend to be pretty passionate after they've worked on a Habitat build, then they'll do the whole gambit. So, if I were to wrap up on Habitat for Humanity, we know it's a strong brand, and we take great care with our brand because that's what it's the credibility that allows us to succeed. It's very grassroots in terms of a community. Prince Albert in the prairies builds 5 to 6 houses a year, has done for 10 years. They have not one employee there. It's all done by volunteers. Most of our affiliates have more employees, but it's a community of 17,000 who self-generate. The volunteers find the land and get the houses built. I wish we had a lot more Prince Alberts and our numbers would be even higher, but that's an example of a small community, self-sufficient, running grassroots. Edmonton is our strongest performing large Habitat affiliate. They build close to 100 houses a year in Edmonton. Other cities do not, and there are several reasons for that, but if we don't have a strong executive director leading the local affiliate, and we're kind of franchised in 58 regions or territories across the country. You need a really strong executive director to run it, and you need a strong board to support them. And if you only have one of those, the affiliate's really going to struggle. If you have neither, the affiliate's going to get in trouble, and we have to go in and help them out. But we're very autonomous in terms of how we let them run, but we have the sort of formula models to help them along. Companies really like it because their employees can get really engaged, and a lot of them, many companies pay for a volunteer day, and they pay $150 to $200 per employee to come on site. It's a team building activity, builds employee engagement. They get pizza and a t-shirt. We get our houses built. They get something that their employees really feel good about the company participating in. I talked about the value creation. So, how to help Habitat? And there's different ways, but governments, we really appreciate land we can get from them. I'm sorry Mayor Mike's not here. Hopefully someone can take this message back to him, though. Other ways that governments can help, though, is development fees and permits. And depending where you are, when you want to take a lot and turn it into a ready-to-build lot, it can cost, in some parts of Canada, less than $300. To other parts of Canada, it's over $50,000 just to get it permitted and ready to build on. So that's 50 grand that has to go into the price of the house, but if we can get that waived, then I'd rather tell a donor it went into bricks and mortar and shingles than into permits for the city, because that's another place no one likes to see their money go. Many municipalities are really good at working with us and waiving those fees, also helping expedite some turnarounds sometimes on permitting and approvals. Sometimes more at the provincial level, we'll get seed funding in if we can get 20, 40, 60,000. Ontario right now is giving 50,000 a door, so is Alberta. It's easier to get a donor to match that. If we get 50 from the government, a donor will come up with 50. There's our 100. We can rock and roll with a house. Municipalities as well know who many of the families are in need. While there's lots of needy families, reaching out and contacting them is an area where we have worked with municipalities before. They help with different social enterprise, although the Restore is our biggest social enterprise. And the government employees come out and build too. We have lots of politicians out, and it's a great way of getting them engaged. And we get some NIMBYism. People say, well, I don't want those people coming into my neighborhood. Well, if you drive through a neighborhood where there's Habitat families in a new neighborhood, the only way you can probably tell them is the yards look a little bit better, the houses are a little bit neater, because they appreciate this was their one shot in life, and they're to move and jump levels, and they're not going to screw it up, so they do a good job. We don't build ghettos of people and isolate them. We want them very integrated into the community, so they'll be up and down middle-class neighborhoods. We don't want them in the high-end ones, even if we get given land in a high-end neighborhood, because by the time we develop it, the taxes will make that property unaffordable. But we do that. So businesses, we get business sponsorship. Businesses can help an awful lot with gift in kind, which I've talked about. Their employee programs are great, and after the employees come and build once with their company, they'll come back and volunteer more. They'll also become donors. We have a program called 1+1. If a company gives us $80,000 or $100,000 for a house, for an extra 10%, it's like a buy one, get one almost free. We'll build a second house internationally, because it only costs between $5,000 and $8,000 to build an international house, which is a good way to leverage up. And now they've got two houses, and some of their employees will even go away and work on that house in another country. We also do some partnering with universities and colleges. They're a good source of volunteers from lots of students, both in skilled trades or business school classes, that say, let's raise money, let's raise $20,000 or $30,000 in our class, and then we'll go out and we'll build on a house, as well as training. And a lot of students go overseas. So, if we go back to Millard Fuller, he was just convinced since 1976, and that's when he built their first Habitat house, that everybody needed a house. And it's gone on since then. I think we've done 700,000 homes around the world. In the time I've been talking to you, divided by 4 minutes, probably 15 families, 13 families took keys to houses while we've been talking right now somewhere in the world. So it doesn't work for everybody, but it does take one group out of the poverty situation and moves them into homeowners, takes them from being net drains on society and turns them into net contributors to society on the way back. And at a net cost of $45,000 in, I think when Boston Consulting Group's done their study, we'll be seeing it'll be north of 200,000 of return, not just the 120 that they came up with. And I should mention builders as well, because in some cases we're actually competing with builders for developable land, and we're not really taking their customer away, because that family wasn't going to be able to buy a house anyway. But now what we do is, in 5 to 10 years, many of these families are ready to build their own home, and we're creating additional customers that can buy from builders. The second thing, where we've partnered really directly with builders, is when they're going for rezoning, because they want to re-densify and get either subdivisions, townhouses, and we've done it on high-rises in Toronto as well, and they may want 15 floors of high-rise. So they'll, of course, ask for 30, so when everyone screams, they get knocked down to 15. If Habitat shows up with them, and we say, okay, so now you're knocked down to 15, let's go back to the planning board and say, let's get you 3 more floors, and one and a half of those floors worth of units are going to be Habitat units sprinkled through the building, and 1.5 are going to be for you. They've already covered their costs in the 15 floors, so all we need are, it's only direct cost, and we can actually get those units out of them for about $120 or $130 a square foot. Really good prices. We'll send in our own people to drywall, paint, put the kitchen in and stuff, but we don't want volunteers building 20-story buildings. But the city likes it because they're getting affordable housing. The builders like it because they're getting more density. We like it because there aren't freestanding lots to build in big urban areas, and it's working really well. So everybody's taking away something positive with that. So sometimes people, builders are saying, geez, the city gave you this lot and I could have put a house there and that's too bad. Then I'd really like to get them on a more collaborative program when we can do it. And that's it. Take questions. Yes, please.
I was wondering how you deal with the condominium costs for families in a situation, in a situation where you're selling people a condominium unit.
Yep.
Obviously, there's additional costs that are there and potential assessments
Yep.
that might come along the way. So how are those financed so that households don't get into problems with those?
So it's safer than it is. First of all, you need to follow good practices, and those are fairly well known and understood in terms of size of reserve that you need. You have to put together a condominium board. So they work just like a regular condominium board. We have training and counseling for all our families, because if you never dreamed of owning a house, there's some things. Some of them have lived in rental accommodation forever, and when something goes wrong, they phone the landlord to fix it, and they don't come and fix it, and then there's holes in the wall. So first of all, you say, there's a new home warranty on all our homes, just like every other builder, but once they're there, they need to be responsible for that. So we teach them that. We teach them about condominiums. The very first condominium we did was 14 units in Toronto, and we were very Canadian, and we said, okay, we'll make every person a member of the condo board, and they'll all share equally, and everyone. But that's not how it works in a real condo, and it's not how it works with any group of people. There's about a quarter of them that are kind of the organizers and want to run everybody else's life, and they step forward and they run the condominium board, and once a year they have the meeting and everybody comes and votes. But the natural leaders or the organizers come forward and they run that. But we are probably slightly more conservative in terms of the reserves we set aside for them, at least until they get up to an established level. But if there's a hike on that, unlike a mortgage where you're locked into a specific rate, so typically property taxes might be 3-4% of what they're paying us, or not 3 or 4%, probably 15% of what they're paying us, and 85% would go to amortize the mortgage. In the case of a condo, it'll probably be about 15% for taxes and about another 10% for condo fees, and 75% will go. But it doesn't mean their total payment goes up because it's geared to their income. Does that make sense?
Any more questions for David?
I also get asked sometimes about people flipping houses. How do you ensure, if you get a house in Calgary and it goes up a lot in 3 years, the family just flips it and walks away with a windfall. So there's two ways that's safeguarded against. We're evolving our mortgage model, but in most cases, the family's entitlement to the equity appreciation in their home is proportional to how much of the house they've paid off. So if they move into a $150,000 house, to make the math easy, and it goes up to $300,000, but they've only paid off $50,000 worth of their original price, then they get 1/3 of the lift and 2/3. So they have a lot of incentive to stay in that house and pay it down. Second, if they need a place to live, we're still offering them interest-free financing until everything's paid off. So replacing that is expensive. But mostly, it matters to getting a family in there in the beginning that understands this and has a long-term view of bettering their situation and bettering their kids. So the best solution is good screening, but there's some good incentives so people aren't just flipping houses, because donors would hate it if they put a family in a house and then the family walked away with $200,000 3 years later.
So any more questions before we move along? So thank you very much, David. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for coming here today. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Thank you very much. So we're going to keep going on our agenda. So we've reached the last session of the day. I'm not going to take a break or a formal break, but I just wanted to point out that there is coffee, there's cookies and fruit at the back of the room. So we're going to show a quick video here in a few minutes. So help yourself to some cookies and snacks, and we're just going to keep the agenda going in the interest of time. Although we are in fact quite ahead of time in our agenda. So let's just show a quick video, which is from CMHC. It's one of our videos, but it is relevant to sort of the next session.
CMHC's seed funding provides a grant and loan for the early stages of an affordable housing proposal. Up to $20,000 is available per project. Now you can begin turning your affordable housing idea into reality.
Greenfires would not have gotten out of the ground without the seed funding from CMHC.
Seed funding. One more way CMHC helps Canadians meet their housing needs. CMHC's Proposal Development Funding offers interest-free loans to help with the creation of affordable housing. Up to $100,000 is available per project to help bring a proposal to the mortgage application stage. Some of the loan may be forgiven if the final project meets CMHC's affordability criteria.
McPherson Place would not exist without CMHC. They provided us with a PDF loan to study the development.
Proposal Development Funding. One more way CMHC helps Canadians meet their housing needs. To support the creation of affordable housing, CMHC enables lenders to offer financing flexibilities to homebuyers and developers of multi-unit properties. Our flexibilities can help homebuyers by accepting a broader range of down payment sources and higher ratios. We can also help developers with reduced equity requirements, lower premiums, flexibility in cash flow requirements, and loan advancing.
Without CMHC's assistance, it would have been very difficult to proceed with this project as an affordable development.
Mortgage loan insurance flexibilities. One more way CMHC helps Canadians meet their housing needs.
I think you'll see that last speaker in that video is going to be very familiar here in a minute. So our last session of the day will be I guess facilitated by Innovative Residential. So these gentlemen have traveled all the way from Saskatoon to share their model with us. Innovative Residential has achieved phenomenal growth and won national awards by incorporating housing affordability into their business plan. They achieved this by experimenting with new building techniques, working closely with all levels of government and several financial institutions to create programs that have helped first-time buyers afford the step up to homeownership. And I think it's very inspiring to see that the private sector took such a leadership role in developing affordable housing. So our speakers from Innovative are Tyler Matthews, who is the co-founder and CEO, and was the co-founder of the Innovative Asset Group of companies. He holds a mechanical engineering degree and has previously worked as an engineer in the field of project risk assessment and financial analysis for the petroleum development projects. Tyler was instrumental in the development of the Mortgage Flexibility Support Program in 2009, which led to the successful government partnership between the City of Saskatoon, the Government of Saskatchewan, and the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. He's also led the development of a tax sponsorship program with the City of Saskatoon, a program that the Government of Saskatchewan has also supported over the last 2 years. Tyler currently serves as the president of the National Affordable Housing Corporation and is the past president for the Saskatoon Housing Initiatives Partnership. He has served as an advisor on municipal affordable housing task forces and has shared the company's initiatives and insights at various locations and conferences and webinars nationally, provincially, and locally. I heard he was recently in St. John's, and now you can add Halifax to that list. Joining Tyler is Alex Miller, who is the co-founder and operations CEO of the Innovative Asset Group of companies, and he's been instrumental in the growth and the development of the company's flagship enterprise, Innovative Residential, over the past 5 years. Also a mechanical engineer, graduate from the University of Saskatchewan, Alex worked for a petroleum firm in Calgary prior to returning to Saskatoon. His passion for operational excellence has fueled the quality of Innovative Residential's affordable housing projects and programs. A strong believer in working to achieve best practices, Alex is the driving force around the design and development of the top quality craftsmanship that is the hallmark of Innovative Residential. Involvement in industry-related associations and groups is key to Alex's intention of supporting and giving back to the larger community and province overall. Alex is currently the chair of the board of directors for the Saskatoon and Region Home Builders Association. So let's give a warm Halifax welcome to Tyler and Alex. Here's the clicker. You're welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to come out here and talk to everybody today. It's minus 22 and snowing in Saskatoon, so by comparison, this is refreshing out here. Although it's kind of unusual. When we landed yesterday, the plane was coming in sideways, but I guess that's par for the course here. So let's see if we can get this going. So Alex and I will be talking today about how to create a successful public-private affordable home ownership model. We'll start off by talking about our story as a company, how we got started. It actually involved the relocation of a former military base, and then we've transitioned since then into modular housing, which is really Alex's forte on the engineering and operations side. So he'll walk us through our modular construction that we do in Saskatoon, along with some of the advantages of doing modular construction and the energy efficiency components that we've incorporated into the design. I'll then carry on with some of the work that we've done on the affordable housing continuum and address some of the NIMBYism concerns that often come up with affordable housing. And I'll talk about a successful program that we've created in Saskatoon with a down payment assistance program, and then look at talking about some of the trickle-down effect that we've seen in the Saskatoon market. So to start, we're a company that basically does everything in the development, right from developing the raw land through to marketing. We've done over 600 ownership homes since 2008, 120 rental units, assisted about 2,000 people into their first home, I guess. And we really look at all aspects of the development. So whether it's the development of the raw land, putting in our own servicing, right to the craning of the modular units, we pretty much are doing most aspects ourselves. We've got about 100 employees on staff, a lot of journeyman carpenters and trades. So you can see there's a list of projects that we've done over the last few years since, I guess, 2009 to 2015, totaling 734 homes to date. So our story actually got started back in 2007, 2008. There was an area in Saskatoon, if anybody's ever been to Saskatoon, when you land at the airport, there used to be an old military base that was built in the 50s. That was actually the home of the Air Forces at the time. The city actually rezoned that piece of land in 2003 to become a higher level commercial use, but they wanted to deal with the housing units that were on there. There was about 160, 170 units on the site, and it was really a growing cause of concern in the city with the concentration of the crime and the poverty in that area. So we worked closely with the city to actually relocate 78 units off the military base and transport them across the city under the cover of darkness and shutting down the highway on numerous occasions and relocating them and renovating them in a new area. So here's just a quick map of the northwest quadrant of the city. You can see there the airport is in the northwest, and the military base was just off of the airport. We actually relocated 78 of the units, created some roads through a field to access the main freeway because we couldn't get under the power lines. And we actually relocated it about 5 miles away to an established neighborhood called Confederation Park, which is community that was built in about the 60s, 70s, and there was a vacant piece of land that we relocated the 78 units to. So on the 78 units, it was done in 2 phases because there was 2 types of buildings that we were dealing with. There was a series of 6-plexes that are pictured on the left-hand side in the before column. and then a later phase where we did duplexes. So the first phase involved 10 sixplex buildings, which resulted in 60 townhome units, and the second phase was 9 duplex units. And the sixplexes were actually so big that we had to cut them in half to transport them. So we cut them in 3s and 3s, and then moved them during the night to their new location, and then put them back together and renovated everything. So you can see it was quite a substantial change with the renovations. And a question I often get asked is about the families that were in the like the McNabb Park area where there was a lot of crime. We didn't actually relocate those same families because that was an area of concentration. Instead, these were actually placed on the open market, and we developed some programs at the time in partnership with the city and the province and CMHC to provide down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. So that was kind of a light bulb moment for us, though, as a company. That was the first major project that we had been involved in. We were young and naive coming out of Calgary. We'd done a lot of actually just single-family home renovations, flipping. We'd done about, I think, 25, 30 homes up to that point. And then we got involved with this military-based project. And it was kind of interesting because one day we had the foundations all created for these units, and then the next day they showed up. But then the work started with the renovations on 60-year-old houses, and that was eye-opening, even for some young, ambitious guys. Lots of challenges. We definitely overcame it. It's been a successful project. But it really made us say, like, wouldn't it be better if we could just do that same thing, but with new housing and have everything fit together nice and new, and we knew what we were getting, because those units in the old military base, they were really run down, and there was a lot of surprises when you go in, and I mean, imagine the worst situation you can think of for a house, and that's pretty much what we were dealing with. So having that as being able to do new construction was just a great opportunity. So that's when we started looking at modular construction, and then dealing with the logistics and all that. So I'll actually let Alex take over and talk about modular construction and where we've gone with that over the past few years.
Thanks, Tyler. Let's see if I can work this thing. So I guess, and just stepping back here a quick minute, I just want to thank everyone for allowing us to come out here today and speaking to you on behalf of what's worked for our company and in Saskatoon. And I can tell you this is the first time I've been this far east, and you know, it seems like a very well-mannered place. And I can tell you one thing, we had the opportunity to spend the time this summer with the CHBA National CEO, Kevin Lee. And after we were done, he said, well, you guys are just as crazy as the Easterners. So I thought that was a good thing. I'm like, you know, I'm gonna fit in well with you guys here. So, and yeah, I think Paul, when he talked about the bar, that's what I think was on the agenda for tonight too. So hey, quicker, this is great. So, you know, just carrying on with this modular construction, well, basically it's a process, right, in which you're building, constructed off-site. It's under controlled plant conditions. You're using the same materials, and you're doing it to the same codes and standards, but you're doing it in about half the time. The buildings are produced in modules that, when they're put on site together, they reflect the identical design intent and specifications of the most sophisticated site-built facility without compromise. There's a picture actually that you see in the bottom that's actually modular. Every one of those buildings has 18 to 24 pieces, which you wouldn't know. Honestly, anything can be modular. You just have to kind of have the mindset of what's capable and what's not, and you have to design for it on the early stages. We actually just brought one of the lead architects from Saskatoon just down to the plant last week that we've worked with for a number of years, and by the end of it, because this was the first time he's seen a plant, by the end of it he was selling me on modular. I said, wait a minute, I thought I brought you, whatever, it doesn't matter, let's just keep going with it. Structurally, these modular buildings are much, much stronger than conventional stick frame, and that's because each module has to be engineered to withstand the rigors of both the transportation and the craning onto their foundation. However, once they're assembled and sealed, the modules become one integrated floor, roof, and wall assembly. In addition to that strength, there's actually a ripple effect that occurs with respect to, you know, if you think about every box, how it has 4 walls, it has a ceiling and a roof. And so when you put them side by side and on top of each other, you actually have 2 different assemblies between your neighbors, both side to side and up and down, which results in a much, much higher STC rating, sound transmission class rating, as well as your fire separation. So there's a ton of benefits structurally with modular. In addition to building off-site, the benefits associated with it, inherently a natural fit is the QA/QC. Materials that are delivered to the plant location are safely and securely stored within a manufacturer's warehouse to prevent damage and deterioration from moisture and the elements. I mean, yeah, back home we have snow right now, but you guys have wind and you have rain, and it's just par for the course. That's what happens. I mean, if you just compare the nature of the beast, building outside versus building inside, you just have to think about the environment and the efficiencies. We could have had this presentation outside, but there's a reason we do it inside. There is a reason. Manufacturing plants both have a very high level of QA/QC programs, both with independent inspections as well as testing protocols that promote both the superior quality of the process every step of the way. If you just think about some of the benefits, you don't have flooring that swells, your interior walls are clean, you have no moisture entering the envelope, the building envelope. And speaking of which, the building envelope, as years and years of research continue to get better, talk about the building envelope and how it's critical, absolutely critical to the success of a home. And they're built extremely solid. The materials, all your sealants, hardwares, flashing. You know, has anyone, I wonder when you think about from the building industry, has anyone ever looked at the installation instructions of that stuff? Usually you need good temperatures to install it. Well, how the hell do you do it when you're minus 20? But people do it, right? It's just, they're never designed and put in place the way they really should be. When you're inside in temperatures like this, or if you want to take your jacket off and the floor is always flat and it's not raining and the humidity is controlled, you just inherently get a much, much better product. Reduce site construction activity. This is huge for us. We actually remove roughly 80% of the building construction activity from its location, which significantly reduces our site disruption. It reduces the traffic congestion in the area and improves the overall safety and security of our projects. You think about the site construction, what everyone has to deal with the snow and mud and materials and the time that it takes. Absolutely, there's still some on-site construction that has to happen, but the more you can limit it, I truly believe the better situation you're in. Fixed construction costs. So this one's a really unique one. And as we enter the age and as we continue the age of building information management systems, Revit just being one of those building software that all the architectural firms are continuing to push and utilize now, it's amazing how far we are coming on this construction costs. Through the modular building process, you know, you don't wing it and you don't send the plans off here and then you don't send the granite in 4 months off to get tested, and you don't send the windows off and 3 months later to get priced out, and you don't send the flooring afterwards to get figured out. We need to know everything from start to finish on a project right from the start. And it's really good. It's a great integrated design approach, because at the end of the day, when you're going through and analyzing it, if something stands out of whack to you, like, wow, like the costs here are just that much higher, well, why? Well, you know, we actually kind of built it 6 inches wider than we normally would. Okay, well, let's just change that so then it can affect it down the road. There's so many benefits to having an integrated design. People talk about it over and over and over, but the reality is it doesn't happen. Integrated design is very difficult. In the modular construction, whether we wanted to or not, integrated design is just, it's a part of modular construction. You have to do it. You have to know what you're doing ahead of time. At the end of the day, we don't own the modular company that we work with on an ongoing basis. They have to know what their costs are up front. And by having those costs and having all the material takeoffs, which are done in the computer software, people aren't guessing. They're not using rough estimates. They're understanding the entire set of material goods, and a fixed budget can be derived, removing the unknowns and the change orders that are typically found in stick framing. Computers and software, I mean, they've come a long way. And unfortunately, in most applications, they're really not being used yet in the building industry, in my opinion anyways. And the last point, budgeting becomes useful. I kind of think that's unique, actually, because it does start to become useful when you know what your costs are ahead of time. Too many times you hear of projects that go over budget. Sustainable and environmentally friendly. This is, I mean, all of these points are huge. This is a big one in my mind. And you know, when you talk about doing the right thing and building, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more here, building Energy Star, but why we do it. I think it's just maybe our background of being engineers and trying to always make it better. I mean, building affordable and entry-level homes is one thing, building grants is another, but doing that and ensuring that every single home that we build is Energy Star is another thing. And that's what we continue to do, is try to go above and beyond, but I'll get into that in a second. I guess as owners, though, and as designers continue to look for a sustainable and environmentally friendly design for improved environmental impact, modular construction is a perfect fit. Building in a controlled environment, it reduces waste through avoidance upstream rather than diversion downstream. So everyone can talk about, yes, we'll recycle at the end of the day, but it's three things, and I think we all remember it. It's reduce, reuse, recycle. How do you do that? How do you reduce? You reduce by putting all of your information into a system that tells you what lumber and what sizes and what shapes of everything to buy, so that you're using as efficiently as possible. That's the reduce part. The reusing is in a plant like this, and I'm going to show you a quick video here in a second, because videos can do a much better job, and then that way, if you're tired of listening to me, like my wife and 4 kids, you can always just stare at the video, and that works too. But you'll see in the plant how streamlined it is, but also their ability to take what little waste they do have, though, and to continuously reuse it in other parts of their factory. Blown away at actually their reduction in their materials, upwards of 90% in their materials. But with that being said, there has been studies out of Alberta that when it's all said and done with carbon footprint, it's roughly a half of the carbon footprint is created. And when you do look at some of the Energy Star analysis, I mean, I've given whole presentations on Energy Star alone on just this topic. I think housing is roughly 17 or 18% of the total carbon footprint that's being released every year. And it's important. Homeownership is huge, but how can we reduce that? And 50% is a very drastic number. Safety. Every year, more and more safety regulations continue to increase. They continue to tighten. And the best methods of safety are followed, but building modular continues to dominate in this industry. Permanently installed safety infrastructure located within the modular plants, it lowers both the overall risk associated with construction, as well as it lowers the costs with adhering to safety regulations. The process in which the modules are built within this controlled environment, it lowers both the risk of construction, but also enables a much higher level of enforcement and buy-in. One big thing we always talk about is when workers are comfortable, they'll abide by the rules. And when something is easy, people will follow the rules. So if you imagine you're always wearing a t-shirt and they ask you to tie off, okay. But when you're working in minus 40 and you have 3 parkas on, you can't feel your fingers, and they ask you to tie off, you tell them to something off. That's what happens in the industry. So just the overall nature of it promotes safety. So I've kind of gone through a lot of these points, and like I said, I'm going to just show a quick 2-minute video here, and hopefully you can witness some of the benefits of building modular. And I didn't test this ahead of time. I hope, Jeremy, we did, so we'll just see if this thing works.
Once you have customized the design of your new home, construction begins. Having your home built using the Granger process has several advantages. Both adhesives and fasteners are used during the framing process. Floor sheeting joints are sanded down after being fastened to joists and before linoleum flooring is applied to ensure a smooth surface. We build your home from carefully selected lumber for quality workmanship. 2x6 or 2x8 walls are constructed using jigs, helping to ensure your home is square and plumb. Homes are insulated and vapor barrier sealed in our controlled environment, away from the elements. As well, an additional layer of sheeting is applied to the interior of most homes, which contributes to a more energy-friendly home that provides extra rigidity for years to come. Plumbing and electrical work is tested throughout the building process to meet all appropriate building code standards and customer expectations. Many exterior options are available for your home, including a variety of is inspected by our quality inspectors to ensure it meets or exceeds local and national building codes. In addition to our in-house inspections, independent auditing institutions are hired.
So hopefully that gave you a quick, a quick insight into what modular construction can really be. And actually, I get really, really excited about it. I've been told to kind of calm down a few times about it, so I won't go crazy. But I'm pretty excited about what we've been able to accomplish and where we're going with it. I actually think it's pretty sad that only about 2% of all construction is modular, but at the end of the day, we're going to keep pushing it, and we're going to do what we can, because I don't think you can beat it. But what's really unique is, actually, I'm going to show you a video here real quick of our beta series model that we've built in Saskatoon, a lot of these homes. So we've got it down to a science. But what's really unique is we're constantly pushing the envelope on what we can do to make it that much better. That's why we had the architect down at the plant there last week. And actually what we've been working on for the last 3 months and what we're designing, actually what's being built right now, is we're actually doing a 63-unit apartment building with an underground parkade. And obviously the underground parkade part is built on site, but it's not a typical concrete slab floor. We're actually doing drywall suspended from the bottom of the floor of the first module. But I think what's really unique in this, and I think there's a lot of different technical parts that are unique, the entire roof is being built inside the factory. We've done a lot of low slope and regular sloped roofs, 612, 712 roofs that are all built in the factory that we can tie together on site very, very quickly. This video actually, by changing different roof type, we've actually built it so there's no roof on this one. But on this next one I was just talking about, I kind of got excited about, is they're all internal drains and they're all done on site. So basically we get to site, structurally side by side they have to get connected. We have to put literally a layer of flashing between the two modules, and we're done. And so it's really unique. And when you're talking about any type of weather, if you want to put some of the best SBS roofing systems that have now been designed in place, you need the best temperature. And so I'm really excited about where we're going to be, and in a year from now be able to show you different projects. But anyways, this is one that that we actually started this spring. And the video is actually a bit old. We put this together, I think, in July, and so it doesn't quite show that it's all done. But this project we started in April. We 100% finished in about the middle of October. 44 units that people are living in actually right now. We have an in-house marketing guy, and we like to have a lot of fun with this kind of stuff. All the different videos. If anyone ever wants to check out our website or just come talk to us, I bet you we got 20 different videos, all different camera angles. I mean, the GoPro, we should have bought shares in them. I don't know how many we've bought from them, but anyways, I think we've kept them in business. But it's just amazing what you can actually accomplish, and I think we're a little bit different than the typical builders in the sense where that 140-ton crane that we own, that you see, we own that in addition to about, I think, 19 other heavy pieces of equipment, as well as 80 employees outside the office. And that's kind of our mindset on how we can continue to keep the cost low and build affordable. In addition to that, though, I think what's extremely important is this Energy Star, which I'll just spend a couple quick minutes on, and then I can pass it back to Tyler. I would assume most people probably know what Energy Star is, but just to give a real quick definition, Energy Star qualified home is on average 20% more efficient than a home that's built to the current National Building Code. And these homes represent a practical choice for homeowners who are looking for a new home that is energy efficient and environmentally friendly. So what are some of the benefits of an Energy Star home? This is just a few, but everything from increased homeowner comfort, reduced monthly utility costs, reduced maintenance costs, as overall an increase in the longevity of your asset. So what are the challenges of building Energy Star? Well, again, I'm just going to have to try to sum this up in about 5 minutes because I had to give a 45-minute presentation on this a few weeks ago where I cut out a whole bunch of the stuff that made me really mad. Because honestly, there's a lot of challenges with building Energy Star homes. And for the people that we were talking to around the table at lunch today, seems like we all have the same challenges. They're actually easy to build. They're extremely easy to build. The challenges are that there's no value associated with it, which is absolutely absurd, which I'll get into in a second. I guess I ask, why is there no value for Energy Star rated homes? Maybe it's too complicated because of all the different programs. There's Energy Star, EnerGuide, R2000, Built Green. Is that what it is? Is there just too much confusion in the industry? Well, what's the difference between a home that's an R80 versus an R83? I'd say it's 3%. Who cares? We all make that in an adding mistake. Well, no, it's about 25% more efficient. So the problem is the numbering system is not that intuitive. An 80 to an 83 is not 3%. It's much higher than that. The numbering system is not intuitive. However, there is good work that's being done by both the CHBA National and I think NRC. I forget exactly the partnerships on that, and I think they're unveiling it early in the new year. And it's going to be a little bit more like the miles per gallon or liters per kilometer like vehicles, so you can actually start relating how houses work. So after our first modular project, we kind of started thinking about, okay, well, this is great. We're being really green. We're getting better at this stuff. We're being extremely efficient. We can build projects in less than half the time, and speed is money, right? So that's one way that we can help keep our margins down. But we started asking, are our homes energy efficient? And you know, it was actually kind of unique because we started working with Sunridge Group out of Saskatoon. And actually, these Sunridge guys, back in the 70s, they actually paved the way for Energy Star worldwide, which is something we're pretty proud of in Saskatchewan. That being said, I'm pretty ashamed here in Canada that we haven't continued to lead. And you look at all the different countries, mostly in Europe, they're actually leading the world and where we are in these energy efficient initiatives. A lot of it was started here in Canada, but for a lot of regulations and red tape, I believe, that's my personal opinion of why we haven't been able to push it forward as fast as others have. Anyways, there wasn't any software to analyze our projects. I mean, the software didn't exist. So I said, are you telling me that this single-family home, I can tell you if it's Energy Star or not? Yes. Here's a multi-unit residential building. Can you tell me if it's Energy Star or not? No, I cannot. Why? So it took us 18 months, I think just under actually, to work with Sunridge and NRC out of Ottawa to get the software built to be able to analyze multi-unit residential buildings. It's something we committed that we were going to do. Size helps with affordability, and that's what we focus on. A lot of our projects, I mean, the one picture, it's a bad picture. I should have showed it earlier, I guess, but we actually have a stacked unit. So we have a 1,250 square foot 3-bedroom on top of a 760 square foot 2-bedroom. But because of all the modules integrated, we couldn't actually do the Energy Star testing. So we did get that tested, and we're pretty proud actually that we have that we were recognized as the first Energy Star multi-unit residential building in Canada. So we were pretty proud of that moment. I think that was 1 or 2 years ago now. I can't actually remember. But since we found out, since the software was created, we said now we're going to make it a mission of ours to do this every single project. Every project we're going to build to Energy Star standards. And so we have. 3 years ago, we kind of made that commitment, and we have been doing that ever since, and we continue to try to push that. And it's a little bit frustrating because, as we said around the lunch table, everyone seems as if they're more focused on the quartz and the jacuzzi tubs and the air conditioners and the stainless steels and the hardwood floorings. But you know, everything that I just said there, not one of them makes your home last longer. It doesn't make your home feel more comfortable. It doesn't increase your air quality and your health. And it does not reduce your monthly costs. Yet every one of those, we put a value to them. And we don't seem to put a value towards anything that does some of these comments that I just talked about. Every one of our homes have triple pane, dual Louis windows, tankless hot water, upgraded heating systems, HRV systems, Energy Star appliances, LEDs and CFL. We have insulation, upgraded insulation in all the perimeters, rim joists, walls, and ceilings. All of those don't have a value associated with them, not a monetary value when it comes to the appraisal, which is sad. But we're going to continue to do it, and we're going to continue to push it. And at the end of the day, whether people like it or not, we're going to cram it down their throat that it's the right thing to do. Because I've tried to educate, and I think educating is good, and don't get me wrong, it is. I'm not going to keep beating my head against this brick wall. We're just going to do it, and if other competitors can't step up, well, then they're going to be phased out of the market. That's my opinion. You know, what's a little bit frustrating too is when you talk with appraisers, everything there has a value with it, right? You determine what a building's worth on a cap rate, and it's determined on what their income is. Well, I mean, if you think about the average house costs $8,000 or $10,000 in Energy Star upgrades, but if it reduces your monthly cost by 20%, we're seeing 30 to 35%, if not higher, in some of our units. We're actually doing that test right now. We're in the process of it, as well as my own house. I built my own house that was all Energy Star. We're trying to get a lot better numbers on it. But even if you just took the 20% savings on your utility bills at a fixed amount year over year, not even increasing, which I don't know, I haven't been around, I guess, that long, but I would assume that utility bills continue to increase over time. It's 3 times what the rest of your house goes up on average. 3 times. So why are we not investing in that? Well, usually that's the easiest thing that we can cut and we can not put in there to save a few bucks. At the end of the day, it's costing us 5 times more than it actually would save us. So that's why what we're trying to do in our business is, in addition to building quality products and all the programs, which Tyler's going to talk here right away on, if we can continue to build Energy Star homes and if we can continue to offer them to the market at the same price, then hopefully we can educate builders in addition to homeowners. So modular construction, what it does, this is one of our latest projects. It's just a picture from the inside of it, because that's the fancy thing right now. We started with the guts because we wanted the guts to be good, but like everyone else, we will follow suit and make sure that we can have the inside also be comparable. But we have a lot of discussions and points, and homeowners can understand some of the education of what's behind the walls. But anyways, what this does is it allows us to build high quality, energy efficient homes and give them a helping hand into the affordable housing. So Tyler's going to talk about some of the NIBIism and down payment assistance programs.
So as Alex mentioned, that's the inside of one of our units now, and like you said, there's stainless appliances. Actually, we do put quartz countertops. That kind of, we get a lot of questions actually when we do presentations about what we see in the costs compared to stick building when we do modular construction. So just to look at that question maybe in advance, we haven't done a whole lot of stick building. So it's, I guess don't have the total experience in that market. But from what we're seeing on our costs, we're probably dollar for dollar about the same as what equivalent size builders are building for on a per square foot basis, with the exception that we're able to do a lot of things, get a lot more bang for the buck. So for the same kind of cost per square foot, we're including the stainless appliances, the quartz countertops, the hydronic furnaces, the Energy Star, which probably a $6,000 to $8,000 investment. So we're able to get a lot more bang for the buck, equivalent to like what you see in a factory in the automotive industry. When you look at, and this is Alex's example that he usually gives, is like a $15,000 Kia. What do you get in a $15,000 Kia? Well, you can get the navigation systems and some really high-end features that we've come to expect, but they can put it into those cars because they're done in a controlled environment, and they get a lot of bang for the buck doing that. So I'll move on here to our role in affordable housing and address some of the NIMBYism and down payment programs that we've created in Saskatoon. Before I do that, I guess I'll just kind of back up here with the housing continuum and show where we fit. When we talk about affordable housing, it's really a continuum. You know, on the low end of incomes, you go right down to emergency shelters where people are needing. These are basically the chronic homeless needing shelters. And then there's a number of different steps, right, from transitional supportive housing to independent social housing and rental assisted units, below market home ownership, that would be the Habitat for Humanity area, and then there's the affordable and rental home ownership market, and that's where we focus. The income range that we typically serve is $35,000 on the low end to $75,000. Probably actually it's upwards now to about $85,000 to $90,000. That's a lot of people. It is a huge demographic in our market and probably in Halifax's market as well. And we see that with the number of units that we sell in a year. This year we'll probably do about 250 units in Saskatoon, and we're a little bit smaller than Halifax. So when we talk about NIMBYism, that's often a concern when private sector home builders or even government get involved in affordable housing because it's scary, and all of a sudden things can derail pretty quick when you go before a community and you start talking about your plans. And I can say from our experience in doing 700 plus units in Saskatoon that if you handle it well, it's not an issue. So I'll give some of our tips that we've seen to help with that issue. And now we're at the stage where people welcome us into the community because they realize it's, you know, it might be their children buying a home or their neighbor. Like, it's, people want to know when we're coming into their community. Big thing is that housing must be high quality. You got to reject any substandard projects because that will bite you in the ass down the road. And like Alex said, we put a lot of effort into Energy Star homes. We put that investment into the units. You don't want to have a project come up down the road where it's 5 years down the road and people are going to the media because it ends up badly for everybody. So always focus on quality. Don't cut any corners on this because it's just not a good idea. Watch the wording when you talk about affordable housing, particularly with negative words. These things should be like, treat them like swear words when you talk about low income, social housing. Even be careful with the word affordable because people don't quite understand maybe what context you're applying it. Talk about affordable housing, people can get pretty scared of that. If you have to use the word affordable, we talk about affordable home ownership because people automatically assume then, okay, it's ownership. People are going to take pride in their own homes. So better alternatives to be looking at, instead of talking about low-income families, you're talking about modest income families, working families. Attainable housing is another one that you can talk about. Entry level is a good one that people are familiar with. Starter homes. Those are things that are normal in the market and kind of put people a little bit at ease. So you don't say the wrong word and get people offended right from day one, and then you're trying to backpedal the whole way. So just be careful with that. Private sector builders should be doing lots of marketing. We do a ton of marketing, and this is where we really differ from a lot of home builders because we have our own in-house marketing department with about 6 people, including somebody making those videos. We're out there all the time, putting a lot of stuff out there, having a lot of website presence so people know when we're coming into communities. They can see what units we have available. If you go on our website in real time, if we sell a unit, it's marked on there right away in real time that it's sold. And it kind of begs the question, do you try to stand out as an affordable housing provider or do you try to blend in? And our philosophy has been, we just blend in. And we do mixed developments. About a third of our buyers come through and they access our down payment programs, maybe half depending on the development, and the rest don't. They might have incomes that are too high. So we just blend in. We look like a normal market builder, and people don't take issue to us coming into their neighborhood and building 40 units or 84 units, whatever the case may be, because we just look like a normal builder. And we build great houses. And lastly, I would say, if NIMBYism does become an issue, maybe the last kind of point I would say is promote the facts. And when people say, well, we don't want those people or we don't want destitute people in our neighborhood, well, who are we talking about? Like these are, people of my generation. Our buyers, our average group, their main group is age 25 to 45. I'm 33, so I'm kind of the average age right in the middle of who's looking for this kind of housing product. So I thought it'd actually be an interesting experiment. I did this about 3.5 weeks ago. I looked at every person who applied for one of our housing units since we started our digital management system about, it was 2.5 years ago, and we had 2,800 people apply, which is, we'll talk about in a second when you think about that. If you had as a home builder out here, if you had 2,800 people knocking on your door saying, can I buy one of these houses? I hear you have these grant programs. That would probably change the way you do your sales, right? So I took these 2,800 people and organized them by employer. Where do these people work and what do they do? And this graph, I think, is really telling. This is the top 20 employers in Saskatoon where we saw people apply from. So it's a bubble map, so the size of the bubble indicates how many people. First and foremost, so out of approximately 2,800 people, Saskatoon Health Region is the #1 employer where their employees came to us and said, can we apply for one of these housing grants? 132 people. That's nurses, admin staff at the hospital, clerical staff. Second on the list was the Saskatoon School Division and the University of Saskatoon faculty. So those are teachers. And there was just about 100 of them. City of Saskatoon had 45 people apply in a 2.5-year period. And the green ones here are the public sector areas, and the pink ones are private sector. So you see the last government sector there up at the top. We had a number of Canada Post workers and Ministry of Social Services. And then you get into the private sector. Case New Holland, they're an implement dealer, so they make tractors, farm equipment. They're the biggest private sector employer where we had people come from. So we had 40 people come there. Our company's even on the list. We had 16 of our own employees apply for the housing, so they're our tradespeople that see the house, they want to buy it, so that's a good sign. So I think this is really telling, and this should resonate with you when we're talking about, I don't want those people in my neighborhood. Well, that doesn't make sense when we're looking at they're nurses and teachers. And this is the facts. This is what we got for applicants. And these make great purchasers too, because they have high incomes and can actually move up the home ownership ladder. So promote the facts about who's actually looking for this segment of the market when you're talking about affordable home ownership, attainable home ownership, entry level, whatever you want to call it. That's who we're talking about right there. So when we talk next about the down payment assistance program, the largest hurdle, and we've heard this several times today, for families moving into this area of home ownership is the down payment. We did a study a number of years ago after we had our first, that military-based project. We had 78 people. We went and surveyed them. 97% of the people said they couldn't have accessed that development without the down payment assistance program. So it's pretty telling, because saving the $10,000 to $15,000, which is the 5% down payment, is not an easy reality for families if their incomes are matching their expenses. And that's a 5% down payment on a home that's $200,000 to $300,000, 10 to 15 grand. So in 2008, when we were doing the McNabb Park military-based relocation, we worked with the city and the government of Saskatchewan and CMHC to provide a 5% down payment grant to eligible families. And that model now that we started in Saskatoon has been copied provincially and is now in use in other cities by other developers. And our goal is, we think that can actually copy nationally because it's working very well. So how does that program work? What does it mean? Basically, you've got, under CMHC rules, home buyers have to have a 5% down payment. However, for qualified affordable housing projects, CMHC allows for flexibility in the down payment sources. This is through their mortgage loan insurance flexibilities program, which Audrey would be able to tell you about, or Jeremy or Charlie. In Saskatoon, this MFSP program provides the buyers with the down payment. So you see there the table that we've got, or the pie chart. What actually happens, the buyers obtain the 95% mortgage financing on their own through, like we deal with TD Bank, RBC, all the major banks understand this because it's supported by CMHC. We as a developer contribute 3% towards the grant. The province contributes 1%, and the city contributes 1%. And then the homeowner can buy their home and close. And Halifax has another issue when you're talking about that 3% closing cost, because that's a lot higher than we see in Saskatoon. Our closing costs are about $1,800 is what we have on every house. It's an $1,800 closing cost that they would come up with on their own, and usually that's not a problem. But the main 5% down payment grant is actually provided by us. And that doesn't get tacked onto the price because it has to get approved by CMHC and it has to meet criteria, which I'll talk about in terms of pricing and modesty guidelines. And that actually comes out of our profit, but it's part of our model that allows us to keep doing what we're doing. And then the city and the province chip in the remaining 2%. So as far as general logistics of this program, it's actually the municipality that submits the mortgage loan insurance application to CMHC on behalf of the developer. The municipality, their application actually signifies that the city's on board and that council has approved it and that if there was any NIMBYism issues, that they've been appropriately dealt with. So it's actually the municipality that submits it on behalf of the developer. Now we've done so many, we kind of write our own and give it to the city, and they pass it on, because we've done 700 of these. And then when CMHC gets them, their main focus on when they're looking at them is mostly pricing and modesty guidelines, which is general in nature, but pricing must be below the average MLS pricing for the area, and modesty guidelines. So you've got size restrictions. So when you talk about building smaller houses, this fits within that. Our units are 760 square feet for a 2-bedroom, 1,250 square feet. You're not going to see pools. You're not going to see hot tubs. You're not going to see big double car garages, triple garages, like crazy things that are people's wants versus people's needs, where you see we're trying to accommodate needs versus wants. It doesn't mean we have to cut on the quality, which Alex talked about. We've got exceptional interior finishings, and that shows in some of the lower pictures. But we're just talking about basically the size and the pricing. Requirements of the buyer. So the buyers have to have a good credit history. If they don't have a good credit history, and we get a lot of people, out of that 2,800, there's a lot that come to us, probably 8 out of 10 say, hey, I want this grant program, can I participate? Unfortunately, the answer is no. If they're brand new to Canada, if they don't have the credit, what we've actually done, because initially when we had nothing to offer, it got really kind of frustrating for them when they come and there's no hope. We actually developed a credit building program that's free of charge. It's a 3-module course done over about a year and a half, and then they can actually build their credit. So we say, no, you're not ready today, but in a year and a half, maybe you'll be ready. And we've actually started seeing benefits from that now, where buyers that we put in the program a year and a half, 2 years ago, have now been buying houses from us. So it's a long-term incubator, but it also gives people some hope. So we need, our kind of criteria, we're looking at 650 plus on a credit rating. You could get in with as little as 600, but it just makes the application stronger when you've got a higher credit rating. GDS and TDS service ratios, as Andrew talked about, we're looking at 35-42% under these program criteria. I think if they have really, really strong credit, above 680, maybe that 39-44 does apply. But in general, it's 35 and 42, and pretty much cut and dried, like 35.00 has been our experience. So we see files that get declined for like literally $13 a month kind of thing. Income limits do apply on this. Because it is, there's government funding involved, they've got to set a line in the sand. So the income limits that the city of Saskatoon sets, they actually follow the provincial guidelines. The province of Saskatchewan through Sask Housing Corporation has their own maximum income limits. So the city just says, hey, we're going to follow you guys. And it's actually the province then that screens the buyers to test their income to make sure that they're under 74,000, which is the current number. When it came out a few years ago, it was actually 55,000. And they now revisit that every year, because I started squawking 3 years in when it was still old numbers and they weren't updating enough. So now they update the numbers every year, so it goes up a little bit, pretty much with inflation. So with public funds at stake, it's important, if you guys are looking at a program like this, to have a well-governed screening process. And in our case, Sask Housing Corporation does that on our behalf. But that's the critical choke point that is really the merging point between private sector and government, because we're private sector, we've got the buyer, our mortgage broker is over here as part of our team. Then we have to hand the files over to the government. They have to screen it. So it's really, if you do that wrong, you end up pissing off builders, because you have to work closely. We've got now a really refined process after doing this a lot with Sask Housing Corporation, where we've got good relationships, and the process works well now. So I've seen other builders struggle with this. We have had 7 other builders in Saskatoon. A few have had challenges when they're trying to get through that income screening process, because it's just different. They've never had to screen their buyers. Usually it was just the mortgage broker would give them a stamp. Well, now there's another layer in there. But I can tell you as a company, it is worth it going through that, because like I said, there's 2,800 people we had in the last 2.5 years that came and knocked on our door and asked to buy a house. And so it's just a matter of processing and getting really efficient at that. Last component of the requirements is that there is a homeowner education component, and that's actually the province of Saskatchewan provides that in our case as well, although there's nonprofit groups that also do that. So where does the funding come from, and more importantly, what is the rationale behind the funding? Why would we as a private sector company provide 3% grant? Well, it facilitates sales. We get a lot of sales out of this. And Alex and I are kind of in a dilemma. We don't do the same presentation in Saskatoon because, in Saskatoon we're more like pulling our hair out and saying, oh, these programs are so frustrating. But here I can tell you, like, this does work. And when people, it's the grant programs that draw a lot of this market in. So it really facilitates the sales. So we look at it and say, well, that 3%, that can be drawn, it's kind of a marketing budget in a sense, because we don't have to do the same expensive radio campaigns that cost $100,000 a year. And our sales commissions on our sales side are vastly different too, because we don't just hire, in the conventional sense, get a realtor and just hope it sells. Well, we actually have all the buyers coming to us, so it's more a matter of processing that. So our commission structure actually works differently, so we can actually take that 3%, apply it in a smarter way, and provide it to the buyer and allow them to actually succeed and move forward. The municipality, their 1% comes from, in the case of Saskatoon, they used to do a 5-year tax abatement, which is pretty common in affordable housing. Oh, if you're building affordable housing, we'll give you a 5-year tax abatement. Well, that's not the real challenge. That wasn't the payments. If it's $2,000 a year or $3,000 a year in tax, that wasn't stopping people previously from buying a house. It was the down payment. So when we actually worked with the city, we said, just leave the taxes in place, because if anything, you're setting them up for failure in year 6 when all of a sudden they have to pay these taxes and they're $200 or $300 a month. Just leave them there, qualify them under those taxes, and instead give that same amount of money in the form of an upfront grant. So then instead of just deferring the tax for 5 years, they gave the money up front. And they actually used to give all 5%. When this started, we didn't contribute 3% on our own. They actually did all 5%. But that was only allowing for 50 units a year. We quickly outstripped what funding was available. So we said, hey, we can keep this going. We'll come to the table, split the cost with you guys. That's kind of what their rationale was. When I was in St. John's, they have a tax that they're looking at proposing for partially completed units that would generate about $300,000 a year in revenue. So something like that could actually go into a revolving pot. And for example, the city of Saskatoon put in a seed capital of about $1 million into this program, and now that's a revolving fund where the property taxes just kind of keep getting rediverted to repay that money. So it's a revolving pool that's self-financing at this point. So municipalities have a lot of different sources where they could look to actually start a pot to get this going, and it'd be a little bit of seed funding, and then it would carry on from there. The provincial funding, they also kind of gave this in lieu of the 5-year tax abatement, because actually if you give a tax abatement, half is actually governed by the province because it's the school board, and the other half goes to the city. So they both actually waived provided their tax abatement money towards this program. But also the provinces have a different access to funding, whether it's through the AHI, to contribute funding into this type of program. So why would the city fund this? Well, as we heard the mayor speak this morning, if it's not the city's responsibility, whose is it? And the cities have the most at stake in this to create sustainable housing. And as one particular thing, it's with this particular program, cities have to play a role in funding it, because otherwise doesn't fall into CMHC's guidelines with being a municipal grant. So it goes hand in hand with everybody participating, or it doesn't work at all. So like I said, the city is the single biggest stakeholder in affordable housing. It gets all the benefits. It's getting the tax base, the population growth, a healthy industry, good neighborhoods, and the benefits there for the city. And other cities are doing this, and they're competing for the same growth. When we're talking about immigration to Canada, this is a resource to Canada, and everybody's looking and say, how do we get those people to move to our city? So Saskatoon's putting money into their pot. Calgary's putting money into their pot because they're trying to create housing that's affordable to like the immigrant population, for example, to get them to put down stakes and stay there. Saskatoon used to actually be a hotspot for immigration, but they would go to Toronto and Vancouver because the jobs were there and their communities were also there. So if we're talking about Philippines, for example, people would go to Toronto or Vancouver because that's where their families were. That's now changed, where they're staying in Saskatoon because they've got the economy strong for one thing, but they've got a community there, and there's actually options for them to stay. If you've got no product in that segment of the market but rentals, they could take off and leave, and then that doesn't do any benefit for the city. So think about this as an investment in your future when you're talking about growing the city. The average cost that the city of Saskatoon sees on this program is $2,500 a unit. And they've done 499 under this program to date with us, and then we've actually gone above and beyond that with our own programs. So actually, this is now taking about 2 years for them to repay this grant. So it's pretty nominal now. So when I talk about suggested steps, if you guys want to replicate something like this, what would that look like? Well, this is how, remember I said the city of Saskatoon used to actually fund all 5%, and we blew through that so quickly because the demand was high. We actually came to the table with 3%, and the city actually contributed 2%, because at that time, the province wasn't participating. So I would say as an easy starting point, because the city could engage private sector and be prepared to commit a 2% down payment grant. In the example where I gave, if you had a $300,000 municipal fund that you could put into this and then redirect the taxes over a few years, you would invest that along private sector, so $300,000, and at 2% grant, that leverages 50 to 1. So that creates $15 million of entry-level housing every year. And it's very realistic. Our company in the past 7 years has done $125 million under this program. So you would dedicate a few years of the taxes to redirect that 300 grand, and it becomes a revolving pot. So it's $15 million a year of entry-level housing. Step 2 of this program, or the funding, would be to then get the province on board. Now, if the province came on board right at the start, it'd be easy. You'd just both contribute 1. But that wasn't what we saw in Saskatchewan. But once the province saw how successful this program was and that they were kind of being left away from the table, they came and actually retroactively funded all the units that had been done. So the city put in an application to the city, and they actually got paid back for about the previous 3 years of housing that they created. So it actually worked well. And then the province got roses too, because it looked like everybody was there participating in the program. But it's politics. So that same $300,000 now from the municipality, now that it's only a 1% contribution, gets leveraged 100 to 1. So that $300 grand leverages 30 million of entry-level housing a year. So it's a really efficient investment. Step 3 is where we're at right now. We've got a proposal working with Kevin Lee at the National Home Builders to take this to the federal government. And I realize it gets complicated because the federal government and CMHC already provide funding to the provinces, which then administers the funding. So there's some work that needs to be done here. But optically, I think it'd be very good to have all 3 levels of government. And now we're at the point where we're actually putting in 3% ourselves, so we can actually back that down to 2% and have all 3 levels of government. I think that's a good place to go and have everybody at the table. So we're actually looking at this point to do a pilot program. Like Saskatoon and Saskatchewan are looking to submit this as a pilot program. It'd be great to have like St. John's in Newfoundland and Halifax and Nova Scotia get a few people, a few provinces and municipalities on board to actually really push this forward to get some traction. And by comparison, I think this is really wise dollars being spent, because when you look at what we did in 2009, we did a $1,350 tax credit for renovations. Well, if we're talking about a $2,400, $2,500 investment that actually generates new housing, that's a pretty good use of funding. So I'll talk now about the trickle-down effect. Going back to the housing continuum, and I just kind of simplified it into four areas here. So we've got on the left emergency shelters, transitional supportive housing, independent social housing, and assisted rentals. And then we've got affordable rental and home ownership. On the bottom, I put in just a generalization of the funding resources required to subsidize new construction in these areas. And we talk about emergency shelters. The residents in those shelters have no capacity or very minimal capacity to pay any kind of costs. So they're pretty much fully subsidized, and the operations costs on top of it. So you're talking probably $150,000 to $200,000 a unit plus ongoing costs. Very, very expensive for a government to fund that kind of stuff. Transitional supportive housing, and I kind of generalized and said about $50,000 to $150,000 a unit. When you get into the assisted rental units, I call that a moderate level of funding, $50,000 to $100,000 a unit. And then on the affordable home ownership side, we're talking about a low investment of $0 to $20,000 a unit. By comparison, the government of Saskatchewan actually put out an RFP. They wanted 12 units of affordable housing. They had $2 million. We said we could actually do 20 for for that, and because you had to drop the rents in order to make them affordable. So $2 million, we created 20 units. That's more funding than we've put into every other unit combined on the home ownership side, and we've done 600 of them. So when you talk about efficiency, it's actually like dollar for dollar. We're really efficient on the affordable home ownership side. And what's happened as a result of creating all those units in Saskatoon, we've actually pulled out, asked our staff to just go through our records. Unfortunately, we weren't tracking this a long ways back as far as where our tenants came from. We actually, what we could track was 21 people that bought units from us came from Saskatchewan Housing Corporation units. Because in Saskatchewan, there's no provision when they start making a lot of money to kick them out of those units. And they've got 3,000 units in Saskatoon. They did a study a few years ago that found 15 people over 100 grand of income living there because they hadn't moved out. They'd been there for 20 years and they just had no reason or no incentive to move out. But we had this kind of incentive for them to say, hey, own your own home. In 25 years, the mortgage is paid off. You got 300 grand, 400 grand of equity, all the benefits that we've heard talk about home ownership today. And we pulled 21 people that we could track. I know there's actually a lot more than that. So that freed up 21 units. Didn't cost the government anything except the little bit of grant that we provided, and we moved those people on, and those 21 units became free for other people down the line. So what, I guess my message here is the cheapest housing you have is the ones you've already got. Like the ones that are already in place. Use those efficiently and free them up and be smart about who's in those units. And if you can actually free up that bottleneck, which right now is at the entry-level point on that market, if you can free up that bottleneck, people can start moving through again, and they move up. So here's an example of that trickle-down effect. I just realized that I didn't update it from when I was in St. John's a couple weeks ago because I have Newfoundland housing, but the same principle applies. So if, for example, if there was $15 million of affordable home ownership units that were created annually, you'd be looking first and foremost at the units that are already built by the government. And we actually use this as a form of pre-sales. We actually went out and people that were making a lot of money in the social services units, we actually sold them units, as I mentioned. But cherry pick those top income earners and try to get them out. For us, incomes over $45,000 a year, we're pretty easy targets. Anything below that gets pretty difficult, but $45,000 and up works quite well for us. And then that'll free up another unit. You want to make sure that the city's housing providers are working together to coordinate this strategy. So if everybody's at the same table, then they can talk about specifics, about certain people in certain units, and how do we make the most efficient use of our dollars and our units that we have created. So the city actually can play a role alongside the province with that to facilitate sales with the private sector. And so private sector in here should be looking and saying, oh, that's a good source for pre-sales. So I think that if, as an example, for every 50 units that you create for affordable home ownership, I think that actually frees up quite a few units down the road. And this is, I know in St. John's they were actually looking at creating a nonprofit housing group to look at helping to address the affordable housing situation. And this would be a good role for that, where that organization has people from all the different boards, and you're actually looking at placing people in the most optimal situation and sharing what is a resource, which is, from a private sector, it's the buyer. That's what the private sector is going to look for. Do you guys have any buyers that we could sell a home to and get them out of there? That's how private sector is going to work. So as far as observations and lessons learned, now that we've been doing this for a lot of number of years and 700 units, you want to be careful to avoid creating funding disincentives. So right now, just a simple graph here, for everybody under $74,000 annual income, that's combined total household incomes, that's both income earners, they're eligible for a 5% grant. And anything outside that, there was nothing in place. So if you were in $74,020, unfortunately you were over. There was no gray line there. It was like to the dollar. And so there was no assistance. So I remember one story from our early days when we were doing our first project. We had a lady and the income was $55,000, and she was about $1,000 or $2,000 over that because she worked a second job delivering newspapers, and it made her about $3,000 or $4,000 a year. And she actually asked, should I quit my second job so I can fit within this box? And I didn't have an answer. I just argued with the province and saying, you guys are doing the wrong thing. This is not going to help. It's just creating that welfare mentality where people try to jam themselves into the program. So you got to be very careful with that. Don't create a situation where they're going to fall off a funding cliff, so to speak. So what we've done, we've just basically tiered the funding, so there is no like hard and fast cutoff at $74,000 if you're over that. We continue our funding of 3%. The province and the municipality step away, so they get a reduced amount. So you're not eligible for 5, but you do get the 3. And we actually had one program where if you were above 84,000, you'd get a 1% grant. So we were trying to kind of step that down one level more. So this is just talking about that expanded down payment programs. So as you move higher up in income, there's still down payment grants available, and that's provided by the private sector once the government falls away. And that also helped to keep people from walking away. Because what we would see is that before these were in place, if somebody came and said, I make 76 grand and the income was 74 grand, and we had to give them a no, they would just leave. So it's also a disincentive. And then you end up with kind of concentrated areas where the only people buying were people getting the down payment grant, and that's not healthy either. We try to mix it up. So nobody knows what their neighbor got, if the neighbor got a grant or not, because nobody knows what their income is. And that works very well from a NIMBYism perspective. But you have to have a marketing or a grant program that can facilitate that. If there's no option for them, often they just walk away, and then you just have a concentrated area. So I've talked a lot about the grant programs. I'll talk a bit about the training programs and other partnership that we've created. So one of the key elements of this program is that they're required to take a home ownership and, outside of the government where the city falls away, we actually provide a home ownership and preparation course for people who just receive a 3% down payment grant. And we've also created a credit building program where if people are not successful or can't get a mortgage, we can do a 3-year module course over about a 1-year period, maybe 2 years, build them up to a point where they actually have good credit. And it got to be a lot to administer for us as a private sector company, so we actually created a nonprofit in partnership back in 2011 to help administer some of this stuff. And now we're kind of looking at how do we grow that and partner out with other organizations looking to do this, because we kind of have developed a skill set in this area. So it's a lot of work. Don't get me wrong, like it maybe looks easy when we show all the sales, but it's a ton of work and a ton of attention to detail. People would ask, why not something easier? Why don't you just go build $400,000 houses, $500,000 houses? We're a young company, like 33, 32, founded on the belief that we can create a business that is profitable and also does something that's socially responsible. And at the end of the day, it's much easier for us to swim with the current than against it. You know, when we have municipal leaders and provincial leaders supporting us, pushing us forward, say go, as opposed to trying to hold us back and really put red tape in our face, although there's always issues. But for the most part, we get a lot of support because we're out there doing the right thing. It, at the end of the day, has a huge impact on the people. And that means something to us, and it means something to our employees. When you look at the financial stability that we're putting in people's lives, when we can, you know, see where they're going to be in 25 years when they've got an asset, they've got net worth. As Paul talked about, they've got an ability to retire because they actually have an asset versus just renting for their entire life and then having nothing. And that's powerful when you think about that. And it's helped us to grow a really good, like-minded team as well that gravitates towards that kind of thing. So with that, I guess I want some funky colors. What?
Grab the mic if we get some questions. So we're going to open the floor for some questions, and I believe Mr. Perapa has the first
two
question.
questions, gentlemen. One of them, are there any restrictions on when people can sell their home? Meaning, are you concerned if someone says after a year, it's a great housing market, I want to sell, make $10,000 and move somewhere else?
There are no restrictions. That's part of the program that we've put together. I can say from experience of the 700 that we've done, we do not see flipping because, as we heard from the Habitat presentation, this is their one shot. Because we have private sector dollars at stake, we're very careful with who we put through the process, and we have a really good nose to pick out people trying to screw the system, because at the end of the day, if they screw the system, it's our money too. So we pick out anybody looking for investment properties that are trying to scam the system, they're gone. That doesn't mean an investor can't buy, they just have to go through normal channels. But we do not see people flipping because it's just too important for them.
Now, the second question, the new module, no problem. It makes sense, I see it. How did you move those original sixplexes? I mean, were they modular in the first place so that you could take them apart? Because it's not like you're going to put that sixplex up on a crane and plop it on the back of a truck.
Yeah, the things that we'll do when we're young and dumb. No, they were not built module, or they were not built in a module format that would have made it very easy actually to do. We actually, we worked with a company out of Manitoba that has a ton of experience with this. Later found out that they were all over the Discovery Channel and things like that, but it's actually a very unique process. It's very similar to just moving a regular single-family house. A unique thing about the wartime is that the homes were built very, very strong, and so actually moving it was actually quite easy. But yeah, when we found out that we were going to move these things and kept going along down the road, and then we finally found out we had to cut these things in half, that was interesting. So yeah, believe it or not, you get out the chainsaws and you figure out what not to do the first time, and you do the other ones a little bit better than that. But it was an experience, and I'm happy we did it, and it was pretty neat actually. And it was it was a great start and a great entrance into what we were doing in our business. But at the end of the day, the model isn't feasible. I mean, at the end of the day, there's not thousands of units that you can move and relocate and things like that. So anyways, that's why it was kind of natural fit to move into modular. But if you do want to see some more videos and pictures, we got lots of that stuff. Yeah.
Another question here from Ryan.
Firstly, thanks for your presentation. It was fantastic. My question relates to Energy Star, sort of a two-parter. It looks like you're doing some really progressive things. You showed a 2x8 wall option with extra sheathing. And it seemed to me, if you're doing stuff like that, you're probably even exceeding the standard. So first question is, if you are, how much? And what helps you build the business case to do that, whether it's a matter of principle or if there are requirements from the province or municipal level of government?
So correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler, but I don't think there's any standards whatsoever that have to be Energy Star. A great benefit is that the homeowners will get 10% back of their insurance premiums if they do end up paying anything for that. And we actually pay for the inspection to have it rated and tested. That's not something that's passed on to the homeowner. And actually, I know I'm getting a little off tangent. I'll come back to your question here. I actually got a little frustrated last year because Sask Energy in Saskatchewan, they used to have a rule where to try to encourage Energy Star building, they would give $1,000 towards a homeowner to do this. So as we were building all of our homes, I mean, $200, $250 a year, there's $200,000 that people will get in their pockets, $1,000 each, right? Well, they changed that and said, you know what, we're going to try to put it in the developer's pocket. So now, over 50 units a year, we get $10,000. I don't want the money. At the end of the day, we're trying to do it for the right reason. And I understand that you're trying to incentivize it, but now you've just actually cut a huge portion of your sales and your marketability of that, because we used to use that for those reasons. But I guess the way we build modular, because they have to be designed, like I said, to withstand some of the transportation and craning into place, they are inherently a stronger fit. We just actually had some recent testing done for our STC and fire ratings. I can't remember what the fire on the top of my head, obviously it passes, but a typical STC rating that you need side by side and up and down is a 50. and actually are up and down due to the impact noise, which is very, very difficult to remove. We're only at a 52. Now, keeping in mind a scale of 50 to 60, 60 is actually 10 times more than a 50. It's a logarithmic scale. That being said, the STC rating is not a logarithmic scale. It's the best assumed slope of the graph with respect to the logarithmic scale of an STC rating. So anyways, it's very complicated, but it is inherently better. Side by side, we actually have a 60 rating. So we're actually 10 times better what the code is side by side. Another reason you might have seen a 2x8 wall on there is everything that we do is 2x6, and actually the new Energy Star rules came out this last January, where, again, I could be misspoken here, but I think the Energy Star has now moved up from an 80, sorry, the EnerGuide rating has to be now, instead of an 80 to be Energy Star, it's I think an 82. In some cases, maybe an 83 or an 81. It kind of depends on the location of the province and a whole bunch of wind loads, or, heat loads and everything like that. But so what we did is we made sure to upgrade to those standards. So we have higher insulations in our rim joists, in addition in our attics, and even in our walls. There was a lot of work that was done with Owens Corning out of the States to actually have a higher R value within the same 2x6 wall. I think you can move to an R24 instead of an R20. And also the other unique thing that we do is it's a very unique design, and I think the design is great. And if there's any builders in the room, I think you should take advantage of it, because we've seen a huge benefits in the last few years. I think everyone knows what townhouse design is, right? Usually it's like 2-story, side by side by side by side. And everyone knows what an apartment style is, right? You have neighbors up and down, side to side. Now, yes, if you live on the top, you only have them below you, but you probably have them side to side or whatever, right? But you get the concept. We actually designed and came up with about 4 years ago, and now we've built a ton of homes like this, and it's a huge benefit. It combines both the apartment style and the townhouse. So what we do is we have 3 modules that stack on top of each other by as many deep as you need to, and the bottom unit is a 760 square foot walkout, and then we affect the grading on the side to go from nothing to about 5.5 feet of the total 9-10 feet, to be less of an incline on the front. Then we have a 2-story on top. So we have a 2-story, 1,250 square foot 3-bedroom on top of a 760 square foot walkout. So it's, or if someone wanted to just build a standard, I mean, if you see walkout townhouse style, like townhouses, walkout, it'd be the same concept. Instead of having the walkout, you have another unit living underneath you, and there's a huge benefit, economic benefit with respect to the land value of it. So anyways, we think that the Energy Star, but anyways, just going back to answering their first question you said is, by backfilling our units like that, we then had to do a ton of research, because we're then maybe about 20% of the overall module is backfilled. So you're now we're still setting on top of a concrete foundation, but you actually do have to build that initial part that's backfilled, that 5.5, 6 feet, out of the proper pressure treated assemblies. And so that's why we then go to a 2x8 with hurricane straps and everything else. So
Thank you.
Any more questions from the audience? I'll throw one question out to you guys. At one point, you mentioned in the progression of your company, you had a 2,800 applicant waiting list, or applications for your development. And certainly the market conditions in Saskatoon are quite different from here in Halifax. In Halifax, you've heard this morning, we're kind of in a bit of a subdued market where housing starts have slowed and resale activities have slowed, whereas Saskatoon is booming. So would you attribute, how much of the 2,800 waiting list would you attribute to your unique model versus it's just a booming market, you could have built anything and you would have had a waiting list anyway?
Yeah, right now in Saskatoon, we're seeing similar trends with our housing that's $400,000 to $600,000. In the neighborhoods where we're building, there are dozens of houses sitting in the $400,000 to $600,000 market, to the point where they're reducing prices. And this is scaring a lot of people in Saskatoon right now, because it's been slow for the last 4 months. We had record sales in the last 4 months, better than we've had in the last 7 years. Because I don't know if it's so much that maybe demand isn't there. Demand is shifting, because I think people are focusing more and becoming smarter with affordability and matching their housing choice with their income. And so we've seen that demand on the entry-level side. If we didn't have the program, I mean, it would definitely diminish the demand we've seen, but our pricing would still be in the right area. And so I think it's, Paul had talked about it earlier, about listening to what your market is actually wanting versus thinking you know what they want and just building it and hope it sells. So I think there is a demand there. And if you're not seeing that product built in Halifax right now, well, it's kind of I don't know if it's a chicken and the egg. How can you see if there's demand if there's nothing there for people to buy?
I don't have much to add. I was just going to say that it was surprising when I was kind of looking at a lot of the presentations this morning. I was, you're looking at a lot of the single family starts and looking at the total starts, and then I'm going, where's the multifamily starts? And I didn't see a ton of activity. I didn't see a lot of information on it. And so either one, I was sleeping during those parts, and I'm sorry, or two, maybe it wasn't on there, or maybe there's not a lot of multifamily being built. And I'm not saying that that's the key to anything. I'm definitely not. It's just that's the level that we focus on. We don't build single-family house. I shouldn't say that. We do build a couple, but we don't. We do it to try to keep our heads in the market and understand what's going on, but we focus on multifamily. And what I've seen as far as being a part of the Saskatoon Region Home Builder Association is there's a huge, huge economic shift from single-family to multifamily. Everything from the urban and planning right at City Hall, all the way down to the people purchasing. Again, whether it be from an affordability point of view, from a lifestyle point of view, whatever. And a lot of those are exactly what Paul said this morning, listening to what people want, but also ensuring that there's a proper pricing model there. And obviously, this is something I guess we were fortunate enough, and Saskatoon was fortunate enough to kind of understand a little bit before things derailed. And then I think by adding as many units as we have in the city of Saskatoon, even by doing it modular, it's been able to really help the affordable housing crisis, I guess, that everywhere else seems to be having, because it really is happening everywhere. And I don't know if it's more selected areas. I think it's just that we had a huge price increase nationwide, and so everyone's just trying to play catch up and figure out exactly what is the right value.
Okay, we have a question from the crowd, but quickly I'll just address the multifamily. So we certainly had a substantial amount of multifamily starts here in Halifax. I think what's unique about our market is that a lot of it is rental. The vast majority of it has been rental as of late. So it's just the focus of Tim's presentation was on home ownership, where here we do have some condo starts, but it's mostly, the home ownership market is mostly detached dwellings, where our multi-unit starts are mostly rental, which is a bit of an anomaly for Canada. Usually multi-unit starts are condo or ownership in other parts of the country. I think, am I right? Yeah, okay. So we're just gonna jump over to a question in the back of the room here.
Yeah, just kind of an extension on that question. Just wondering, how much like your modular system and the uniqueness of that allowed you guys to push forward that program with government? I guess in other terms, if you guys were just a regular home builder, would we see this level of success in cooperation with the various levels?
Modular actually came about for us in 2010, and we had created the program with government in 2008 when we did the military base relocation. So because we were involved with that project, we did have a lot of cooperation from government because everybody wanted to see that situation dealt with the military base. So they all had their own ideas and actually had their own programs in place. For example, the city of Saskatoon had their 5-year tax abatement. SHC had some other programs. They were doing income screening, homeownership training. They had an unsuccessful second mortgage program. CMHC always had their mortgage loan insurance flexibilities, but they never really kind of were talking to one another. So we actually got all three levels in the room at once and said, hey, let's create something that works. So that's how it started, and then it just carried on from there into modular. But I think Saskatoon is a pioneer in affordable housing. They were looking at affordable housing, really trying to address the issue already in 2006, 2007. They had a whole business plan that they put together in 2007 for their future priorities for the next 5 years of how to address affordable housing. Now other cities are starting to see that because it's been very well publicized about the success in Saskatoon affordable housing. They're seeing that, and I think there is a willingness. From what I hear today from the province and the city and what I saw in Newfoundland, there's a willingness. I don't think anybody's trying to say, well, this isn't a good idea. I think it's just a matter of timing and the right projects coming to the table.
And just to add a quick comment to that, with respect to stick frame versus modular, actually, with what we were doing, there was a lot of talk about it. There still is a lot of talk about it in Saskatoon and how well it's working. There's been some others that have tried modular, and some have been okay successful, and they're getting better and better, and some have actually just fell off the radar, and they did it for a number of years and they just declined. So it's not the modular construction process itself. It really is about working together and making the programs what they are, and actually the accountability to it. What modular's been able to do for us, though, is because we can now build in less than half the time, we've been able to probably take advantage of the programs a lot more than others, and we've been able to kind of leapfrog our business. I mean, I think we're the second largest builder in Saskatchewan now in the course of 5 years, where the other companies, the other remaining 4 out of the 5 have been there for 20 plus years. So I think it's just been able to give us that means to be able to use the programs more. But at the end of the day, modular, there's good modular construction and there's not so good modular construction. It's the exact same as probably stick building. There's some amazing stick builders and there's some poor stick builders. I think just the overall, the layout of modular construction, though, the chances of getting a better product are that much better, but you still have to do your work. I've toured 18 plants in the past 4 years, and there's only 3 out of those 18 plants that we would ever work with. There's only 3. So, I mean, that's my opinion, but it is what it is.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? Well, thank you very much, Tyler and Alex. Another round of applause for the great presentation. So this concludes our session for today. I'm just going to do a quick wrap-up, but before I sort of summarize the day, I'd like to remind you that we have some evaluations on the table. So your feedback is very important to us. So of course, Housing Nova Scotia, Habitat, and CMHC worked very hard at bringing you this conference. And the partners would like to know in terms of, what did you like, how can we do better, and in the hopes of perhaps bringing you something again, perhaps next year. So just to wrap up the day, we certainly this morning we had a great information session on the current environment. Janet, Tim, and Andrew talked about the mortgage environment, talked about the housing market, and then we moved on to our second session where Dan, Paul, Tim, and Nicholas talked about some opportunities to overcome some of the barriers to home ownership. And then, of course, we heard from David from Habitat and from Tyler and Alex this afternoon about some models that have been very successful throughout the country. So thank you very much for joining us in celebrating National Housing Day. We appreciate you coming here today. And hopefully you have some inspiration and some ideas to continue the good work that you do in your work and in supporting affordable homeownership here in the province. So thank you very much.